Welcome to the 2025 Biocontrol Summit, Success in Biocontrol, Weed Management Silent Heroes. My name is Christy Trifone-Millhouse, the Executive Director here at the North American Invasive Species Management Association. A few house cleaning items before we begin. I'd like to invite you all to share with us in the chat where you're joining from. Take note of anyone you might know, send along a hello. Additionally, you will see the reaction button at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to use these after each presentation. The Q&A box is where we ask you to put all questions. If you add them to the chat, we'll not be able to answer them there. And finally, this summit is being recorded and will be made available on NASMA's YouTube channel after the event. Our theme this year is Success in Biocontrol, Weed Management Silent Heroes. And for many, this will be the first time you learn about biocontrol. For others, you're working in this space every day to expand and improve this management tool. No matter what your experience base is, we hope you'll learn something new during today's event. Before we start, I'd like to share a little bit about NASMA for those of you who don't know us well. The North American Invasive Species Management Association is a professional nonprofit association with a mission to empower invasive species management in North America. Over 30 years ago, NASMA started as a grassroots movement that has since grown into an international organization focused on supporting invasive species management on all fronts. While NASMA's evolved over the years, we've stayed true to our core passion by uniting professionals, tools, and communities to protect biodiversity and restore native ecosystems throughout North America. We are active on many social media platforms, and I encourage you to follow us. So what do? At the heart of our work, we focus on creating bridges across geographic divides and jurisdictions through programming that focuses on our three core pillars: the connection, the tools, and the voice. NASMA is the organization that provides a collective voice for our members and the invasive community as a whole on a national and international scale. Next, I'd like to highlight one of our most popular introductory courses in our NASMA Academy programming, the Classical Weed Biocontrol 101. This 3-hour introductory course was created by professionals, many of which you will hear from today. And the course was fully funded by the USDA Forest Service, which allows us to offer this course at no cost to you. Participants learn the fundamentals of classical weed biocontrol, how the science and regulations work, how classical biocontrol differs from other approaches, how agents are identified and approved, and how biocontrol fits into integrated weed management. And you can register at any time at nasma.org. In addition to courses at NASMA Academy, we have a few upcoming events to note. NASMA is partnering again with the Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change Network to host the Invasive Species and Climate Change Conference on December 9th and 10th. And this is a free virtual conference for everyone, and this year's theme is Better Together, Empowering People and Partnerships. This event was a huge success last year, and we're very excited to be hosting it again. Please go to nasma.org to register, and your registration link will work for both days. Some other upcoming events: we have a great lineup of free monthly webinars still to come this year and to kick off 2026. In December, we'll close out the year with a webinar featuring 3 speakers discussing biological control for spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven. This session will serve as a strong finish to our 2025 Know Your Invasives campaign that has highlighted the spotted lanternfly. Looking ahead to 26, we're already building out our webinar schedule. We'll start the year off strong on January 28th with a presentation from 2 of our Sea Grant colleagues sharing results from the recent Sea Grant-led workshop on invasive species communication. And we hope to see you there. And lastly, please join us February 24th through the 26th in Annapolis, Maryland, as NASMA hosts the USDA Cooperative Forum on Invasive Species, previously known as the USDA Interagency Research Forum on Invasive Species. This long-standing 30-year event is an in-person forum that brings together researchers, land managers, and partners to share the latest science on invasive species. This year's event will feature a dedicated session on biological control. Again, check out nasma.org to learn more. As a friendly reminder, membership dues help to fund our educational programs like this summit. If you're not currently a member, we offer a variety of different membership options. You can view our new membership structure on our website. And if you're unable to become a member at this time, we encourage you to make a donation. Every gift, no matter the size, helps to support our critical mission. I would like to acknowledge and thank our biocontrol programming sponsor, the USDA Forest Service. NASMA was able to host this summit, provide webinars, support the Biological Control Committee, and offer fact sheets to the public free of charge because of this generous investment. Additionally, I would like to thank all of the NASMA 2025 Premier Partners, whose commitment makes events like this possible throughout the year. It is my pleasure to recognize the Classical Biocontrol Committee members whose hard work brings biocontrol education to this community. These members over the years have helped create weed and biocontrol fact sheets for 43 systems and the Biocontrol 101 NASMA Academy course. All are available on NASMA's website. A special thank you to those members highlighted in green who were responsible for organizing this year's summit, particularly the co-leads, Melissa Maggio and Jennifer Andrews, along with our NASMA team members, Jody Hogan and Tegan Wilmot. It's now my pleasure to pass the mic over to Megan Harlow, who will be moderating today's event. Megan?
Hello, thanks, Christy. Welcome, everyone, to the Annual Weed Biocontrol Summit. Thank you for joining us. My name is Megan Harlow. I'm a research biologist with the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center, and I am a member of the Classical Biocontrol Committee. We are joined today by Melissa Maggio with the Montana Biocontrol Project and Monica Chandler with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. They will help manage the Q&A box and select questions to ask our speakers during the scheduled question and answer periods. Again, thank you for everyone who helped put this summit together and for our presenters for being here today. This year, the summit will highlight the often overlooked successes of biocontrol, those stories with meaningful impacts that rarely make the headlines. Our invited speakers include both broad scope land managers and leading biocontrol experts, each sharing firsthand experience of success, whether through measurable reductions in target weeds or through enhanced community engagement. With current decreases in funding support and federal biocontrol positions in the U.S., many potential future successes are at risk of being lost. These proven programs can serve as a model for future programs and demonstrate the value of continued support for biocontrol efforts. The Classical Biocontrol Committee wants to continue to strengthen and expand our community, and your input is invaluable. There will be a link for a post-summit survey provided as we close out the summit, so please stick around and fill that out at the end. We look forward to hearing your feedback. You are also welcome to contact any of us directly at any time. A few reminders: during the scheduled periods, we have formal Q&A, so that's going to be twice during the summit today. Please use the Q&A box and not the chat so that we can answer those questions. And also, please specifically address the speaker who would like to answer the question. You can chat any technical issues to Tegan Wilmot or email education@naisma.org, and she'll be able to address the issue. And the link to the agenda, I think, has been posted in the chat box. So with that, I will turn it over to Aaron Foster with Fremont County Weed and Pest District for our keynote address.
Thanks. Well, let's see if we can get this going here. Again, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. My name is Aaron Foster. I am the district supervisor at Fremont County Weed and Pest District in Lander, Wyoming. And I'm also the chairman of the Wyoming Biocontrol Steering Committee. And it's definitely a pleasure to be able to speak with you today on this subject. So this summit is focusing on the successes in biocontrol. Success doesn't have to just include biocontrol agents establishing and reducing weed impacts. This presentation will focus on the success of Wyoming's Biocontrol Steering Committee, how the committee was formed, what it has accomplished, the importance of biocontrol investments, and the need for sustained partnership. Most people think of Wyoming as this: beautiful landscapes and mountains like those around Yellowstone, Grand Teton National Park, or the Absaroka Mountains pictured here. Or if they've only traveled through Wyoming via I-80, they might think about it this way: a wild, cold, windswept desert that they just can't wait to get through. Both of these are true. Others know Wyoming for its iconic wildlife, like the grizzly bear. And some of you may know this grizzly. In fact, this is grizzly 399, which has been in the news, and some of her cubs in the past. Or you know of Wyoming's wildlife as the sage grouse, and having the largest remaining habitat for sage grouse in the West. But what is it about all these images that have in common? Well, Wyoming is wild and beautiful, and we want to keep it that way. A leading threat to this wild and beautiful status are invasive plants, which are altering ecosystem services, reducing important wildlife habitat, and impacting our economic resources. Issues like this picture here of whitetop in the Crowheart region of my county. Wyoming is fortunate to have weed and pest districts in all 23 counties, serving as the central hub for invasive species management in their communities. These districts do important work for land health, preventing and reducing the impacts of invasive weeds. Yet some problems are just too big to control the symptoms with medicine alone. This is where Wyoming sees a need for biocontrol. There are weeds that are so expansive that the most effective tool, herbicide, may not be practical, safe, or the negative impacts outweigh the positive. The cost of sustained management may also be too expensive. And this picture here, you can see, if you're looking closely, a landscape scale issue of leafy spurge in and around Lander, Wyoming. Wyoming has had interest in biocontrol since at least the late 70s and early 80s, when we first introduced Rhinocilus conicus and Trichocereal horridus for musk thistle management. These two weevils were introduced in Wyoming somewhere around 1979-ish, early 80s. And since that time, we have seen significant reductions in musk thistle populations in many areas. According to my predecessor, Lars Baker, when he started working for Fremont County Weed and Pest around about that time, 1980-ish, they estimated to have about 11,000 acres of musk thistle in Fremont County. And after about 20 years of the biocontrols having their impact, the estimate went down to about 1,000 acres being impacted. And I can attest to this now, that musk thistle really isn't a significant concern for us. And this is largely due to the biocontrol agents. But it wasn't until the early 90s that Wyoming really dove in as a state. The Wyoming Biocontrol Steering Committee was formed in 1994 as a coordination tool for the redistribution of leafy spurge flea beetles. The goal was to conduct a statewide effort to release the beetles on every quarter square mile in Wyoming that had leafy spurge on it. And we accomplished this 4 years later. Now leafy spurge in some areas, like this rangeland site just outside of Lander, where I'm at, is less dominant and has increased desirable grass forage because of biocontrol. In fact, 25 years of data from the previous slide and 7 other sites around Fremont County show a clear impact of the biocontrols on leafy spurge. The cover of leafy spurge went down over that period, while other vegetation increased in that same period. The other vegetation that increased was primarily desirable perennial grasses and native forbs. There is still leafy spurge at all of these sites, and some years are worse than others. But this is success with biocontrol. The success increased interest in the value of biocontrol for other weeds impacting Wyoming. Leading the biocontrol committee to join consortia and help fund agent development for Canada thistle, houndstone, perennial pepperweed, whitetop, Russian knapweed, Dalmatian toadflax, Dyer's woad, oxeye daisy, Russian olive, salt cedar, and others. Now the committee gets funding from contributions from individual counties and from a grant that allocates pesticide registration fee dollars back to weed and pest management projects. This slide illustrates our investments in biocontrol over the years. Nearly every district has helped fund biocontrol at some point, from as little as one-time contributions of $500 to as much as $35,000 per year. In fact, if you or your organization wants to help, but you don't have a mechanism to do so, I can take your money and distribute it to those people doing the research for you. We've done this in the past with counties in Montana and with the state of California. The bulk of Wyoming's funding is currently used for research on potential agents through our partnership with CABI. However, the committee doesn't just focus on funding overseas research. We have other objectives as well. These objectives include garnering support for the University of Wyoming to hire a dedicated biocontrol faculty member, prioritizing weeds in Wyoming that we would like to see agents for, helping collect and redistribute biocontrol agents across the state, helping fund purchases and releases of biocontrol agents to the poorer counties, promoting the use of the standard impact monitoring program protocol for evaluating establishment and impacts of biocontrol agents, and helping support biocontrol interests, like its use as an integrated management tool in Wyoming, promoting funding for biocontrol within federal agencies and other states, and advocating for efficient review and approval processes for agent petitions. In this slide, Cody Thrasher, my biocontrol guy, is releasing the first agent in Wyoming for whitetop. Annual losses to agriculture alone due to whitetop in Wyoming are estimated to be over $700,000 a year. This is high compared to our investments into a sustainable management tool. And once we have that tool, those agents on the ground, the costs become even cheaper. So biocontrol is important to Wyoming, and you don't have to just take my word for it. Brian Songer is a Sheridan County weed and pest assistant supervisor, and he tells me that he sees the value of biocontrol in reaching more stakeholders in his community. And in Teton County, they've seen their rangeland health improved through the use of biocontrols, specifically the use of the Dalmatian toadflax stem mining weevil. And I can attest to this. I actually worked in Teton County and monitored that steep slope. It was a fun time. And Josh in Park County is excited to try a clever integrated approach to oxeye daisy management when a biocontrol becomes available for it. I would like you all to share your successes with biocontrol in the chat. We would definitely love to hear about biocontrol success from all of you attending today. So Wyoming's success utilizing and advocating for biocontrol is only possible because of the large network of organizations, agencies, and individuals that contribute to the discovery, the research, the environmental reviews, the rearing, the monitoring, and the sharing of biocontrol resources. The future of Wyoming's success is in a state of uncertainty. Most of Wyoming's funds go to CABI in Switzerland. CABI does a large portion of the exploration, discovery, and specificity testing of potential biocontrol agents for a number of North America's most destructive weeds, like whitetop, common reed, flowering rush, tree of heaven, and Dyer's woad, to name a few. The distribution of support is heavily dependent on just a few entities in a couple of states and provinces. So the recent news of cuts to CABI's USDA APHIS funding for 2025, the impact on CABI is huge, and we are concerned that progress will stall or stop on projects we have been investing in for years. In addition, this cut threatens jobs, the institutional knowledge and experience that goes with those jobs, and the cost to regain that knowledge. To help CABI overcome this challenge, Wyoming and Montana have scrounged up an additional $80,000 to our typical allocations. We hope this helps keep our investments moving in the short term, but we need to advocate for the federal funds to be reapproved or we risk seeing severe setbacks. And if you'd like to help CABI and contributions, again, I can take your money. So CABI is just one specific example of an uncertain future for biocontrol partnerships. Many of you are using biocontrol and are directly and indirectly reliant on federal funds and federal positions. So what happens to our confidence that biocontrol will continue to be an important integrated management tool when funds are cut or canceled and positions are lost with no plans for replacement? Well, it tanks, doesn't it? The Nasal Biocontrol Committee recently conducted a survey evaluating the effects of current federal policy changes on the biocontrol community in the US. As you might expect, Wyoming is not the only place where concerns of an uncertain biocontrol future are apparent. This survey was completed by 32 respondents and 44 people partially completed it. Of those that did respond, about 3/4 of those respondents were non-federal biocontrol practitioners. The majority of respondents are concerned that future federal funding for biocontrol may not be approved or available. Respondents are concerned that sustained effectiveness for their biocontrol programs will be reduced through personnel reductions and lost institutional knowledge, through the reduction in implementation of biocontrol, and through the reduced biocontrol development. Hiring freezes, layoffs, early retirements, and reorganization have already played their toll. They've delayed projects, they've impacted technical expertise and institutional knowledge, and are impacting our partnerships with project coordinators. Without refilling these lost positions, the impacts will be felt and may be substantial. All of these impacts are interconnected and have a trickle-down effect that we all will feel. Some of the specific positions that were mentioned in the survey that have been impacted are a biocontrol researcher with the Forest Service, at least 2 ARS researchers who focused on biocontrol development, technicians with USDA ARS, multiple partners at the local and regional level that are integral for our work, regulators who are critical to moving our mission forward, a biocontrol and pesticide coordinator position with the Forest Service is vacant now. And according to one respondent, prior to January 2025, there were 60 forest health entomologists in the country, and now there are only 36. So I'm proud of Wyoming's accomplishments. Wyoming is just one cog in a biocontrol system. We need all of these cogs in the system working or the machine breaks down. The level of uncertainty is at an all-time high, and now is the time to share biocontrol success. Whether that success is direct impacts to target invasive plants, a tool for educating children and the public about invasive species management, organizing movements to get biocontrols available to more managers, or advocating for biocontrol as an important tool for managing invasive weeds. I hope the presentations to come today inspire your support for biocontrol. Share your successes with your organizations, with your state, your partnering agencies. Share your concerns about the uncertain future for biocontrol with your organizations, your agencies, and the state and federal lawmakers that you have in your areas. Find your local biocontrol champion and help them advocate for biocontrol. And maybe even consider investing in biocontrol development. Every bit helps keep the light on. And if there are more smaller pieces of pie, the greater our ability to weather uncertain times will be. And again, I really appreciate the time for this, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of today's presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. That was sobering. It's good to see those results. Next up, we have a few talks on the target weed management successes that he mentioned. We have Sonia Daly with the U.S. Department of Energy Legacy Management Support, and you are up next. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you for your time today. I'm currently a biocontrol specialist and ecologist with the Department of Energy Legacy Management Support. Thanks to NASMA to invite me to share my work when I was with the Colorado Department of Agriculture. I worked at the Palisade Insectary for 17 years. A true honor to share this part of the story with being the Russian knapweed biocontrol program manager from 2018 to 2023. Thank you. I like to start with this slide to introduce and provide major gratitude to the institutions and scientists for their work with the Russian knapweed program. So as I'm going through this talk, it's important you know they are part of the journey and success. It takes a village and it's a beautiful one. I would like to thank CABI for developing safe and effective biocontrol agents to fight against Russian knapweed. Thanks to the USDA APHIS for providing biocontrol agents to establish nursery sites in Colorado. I would like to personally thank Jeff Littlefield for sharing knowledge that helped develop a massive Russian knapweed distribution program. Most of the audience recognizes this noxious weed. Russian knapweed is a non-native weed that mostly invades the western US and outcompetes native range. Palisade Insectary offers two USDA-approved host-specific biocontrol agents to naturally control. I want to emphasize these agents only control Russian knapweed. They would not control diffuse or spotted knapweed or any other weed species. So it's very important to ensure you're releasing these agents on the correct target species. The Russian knapweed biocontrol agents are the gallfly, Japiella ivanicovi, and the stem gall wasp, Alicidia acroptolonica. Both biocontrol agents for galling or abnormal swelling on the plant. The midges induce rosette galls on the leaf shoot tips. Photo 1 is displaying the rosette galls, and the tiny flies are circled in red. Picture 2 is showcasing the stem galls along the main and lateral stems developed by the stingless wasp. Both agents can be found on the same stem seen in picture 3. This is very good as we have one agent tapping into the nutrient part of the stem and the other agent cutting off the flower supply. I have the honor to work and be mentored for 20 years by Dan Bean, the director at Palisade Insectary. Also, truly grateful and honored to work as a biocontrol specialist for that long. Over the years, Dan provided great teachings and plans to the team to implement, promote biocontrol in Colorado and out-of-state users. These listed fundamentals are written many times in my meeting notes from over the years. Release and distribute. Then we must monitor the biocontrol agent's impact on target species. It's very important to provide education, develop partnerships and collaborations to expand biocontrol. I took this plan when I became program manager in 2018 and ran with it to try my best to help naturally control Russian knapweed. Today, my talk emphasizes my endless efforts and nonstop work in developing partnerships and collaborations to provide training and education to expand biocontrol in Colorado. A true honor to serve the people. In the photograph is a very important weed biocontrol specialist and promoter. Carol Randall worked for the U.S. Forest Service for many years. We're very grateful to Carol for her dedication and endless work to implement biocontrol. My journey to develop partnerships and collaborations started with receiving stem galls from APHIS. This provided me opportunity to generate a plan on how to utilize these stem galls. I contacted every county weed manager or natural resource manager with Russian knapweed in their county to offer wasp releases to help develop nursery sites for a no-cost agreement that the Palisade Insectary could come back to collect. Also, I offer training. A quick overview of stem gall wasp releases served since 2013. Prior to 2019, we received the wasp releases from Jeff Littlefield or Rich Hansen. Palisade Insectary used the releases to develop nursery collection sites so we can build up enough agents to serve the people. Then in July 2018, walking a site outside Delta, Colorado with Dr. Paul Odie and Teresa Barash from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, we discovered almost every Russian knapweed plant had stem galls. A site developed in 2015 by the previous Russian knapweed program manager, Jess McKinney. I didn't start massive stem gall collection until February 2019. So the APHIS Montana stem galls provided security that I could offer releases to the Colorado County weed managers. Before I dive into showcasing the county weed managers, I would like to highlight that the Palisade Insectary collaborates with multiple universities. A very important CDA partnership and collaboration is working with Dr. Paul Odie at CSU since 2014. And the photo is Paul holding a Russian knapweed root. Dan and Paul worked together to get a federal grant to research the question Paul had interest in. Are two agents better than one? We worked with Paul and his graduate students to address the question in field studies. We worked on a garden experiment with Paul and his graduate students to research the question. CSU had 100 cages in Fort Collins, and we had 100 cages in Palisade. Palisade Insectary observed and monitored this interaction among insects at monitoring sites across Colorado. The photos displayed are showcasing the interactions that two agents are better than one. Photo 1 and 2 showing midge and wasp galls found on the same plant. Both agents working together to help stunt the growth of the plant and decrease biomass. Biocontrol success with two agents working together to suppress Russian knapweed. Also, photo 1 is displaying how large these stem galls can get, like the size of a fingerling potato. The galls in the photos were observed at a monitoring site outside Gateway, Colorado, that is 150 meters from the Dolores River. The monitoring protocol performed at the Dolores River monitoring site is the macro plot monitoring protocol. All galls are counted within a 16-meter square on the point of release. These charts show two agents working together at a site. The above chart showing the total number of midge galls within the census area. The chart showing total number of wasp galls below. We started to release the midges in 2012 and didn't start to count significant number of midge galls in the monitoring plots until we introduced the gall wasps in 2019. As you can see, the major increases of midges in 2021. The data confirms that two agents are working together at the site. I want to point out on the bottom chart the number of wasp galls counted in the census area. We were amazed in 2020 to count over 27,000 stem galls, and in 2021 over 54,000. And in 2023, the team counted the record number at 59,417 stem galls. This chart represents the impact wasps can have at infestations near river systems. The monitoring site and the Russian knapweed biocontrol agents were honored in CABI's invasive blog. We're so honored to share a biocontrol success story, a success story for CABI as well. CABI in Switzerland provided the first gallfly and stem gall wasp releases to the USDA APHIS. Please check out their blog and the wonderful work they share on an international level. I sent stem gall wasp releases to many weed managers in 2019. These county weed managers showcased in the slide went beyond the call of duty to work with me to release the agents, set up monitoring sites, and develop nursery sites. The goal was to develop a distribution program in their county so they could collect agents to move around other infestations or serve their people. The fight against noxious weeds is gigantic, and ingrained in my mind is Dan's vision of developing distribution programs in each county to train and educate the people to get more biocontrol released across Colorado. A great partnership with these weed managers. I would collect, sort, and package the agents, but they would map and generate a plan on locations to release that would be safe from disturbance like herbicide or pesticide treatment. A great collaboration. The county weed manager started training in 2019 on identifying the agents out in the field. In March of 2022, they started training on collection and processing stem galls from their nursery sites. Ethan Proud is an all-star weed manager in Archuleta County. He has passed biocontrol knowledge to other weed managers, ranchers, and farmers, success with expanding biocontrol, and installing confidence to other weed managers to use biological controls. Thanks to Ethan Proud. I'm honored to work with landowners who are dedicated to suppress noxious weeds in a natural way. I observed their struggle and it encouraged me to collect more agents. I provided the same training and education. We met up each year to check out release sites. I established monitoring sites that most of the landowners displayed on the slide, a good partnership to distribute and establish more agents across Colorado. These amazing people pass the knowledge to other landowners, farmers, and ranchers. Again, installing confidence for others to believe in biocontrol and inform them the service provided by CDA Palisade Insectary. Success with increasing biocontrol believers. Grateful for these biocontrol heroes. Britt McClin has been a biocontrol advocate since 2018 and worked closely with Steve Anthony, who was the county weed manager for Garfield County. Steve supported the insectary over the years. Dan Bean developed that partnership, and it was a great example for me how to train, educate, and work with weed managers. Garfield County was the first to develop a Russian knapweed biocontrol distribution program in their county. The site was established at Britt McClin's property. I had the opportunity to visit Brett last month. We observed major suppression caused by the biological agents. I was overjoyed to observe the success at his ranch, observing stunted growth in the Russian knapweed not as thick as 2018, and we started the journey to naturally control the non-native weed. I observed midge galls and stem galls during my visit. Also, I observed the naturally occurring Russian knapweed rust fungus. The Palisade Insectary does not offer for release, but only studying and documenting the rust fungus at sites. A true honor to work with Brett McGlynn, a very proactive rancher to learn about biocontrol and help others in his county to come and collect stem galls to release at their infestations. Also, he provides education on biological control and connect folks to the insectary. A true biocontrol hero. Thanks to Brett McGlynn for his service to the people and believing in biocontrol success. Mersenberg are the landowners
Hey,
at
Sonia,
Ladder
2-minute
Canyon
warning.
Ranch and a part of a conservation partnership with Colorado West Land Trust. The ladies are true inspirations to me. All collaborators are my favorites, but these amazing women behold my biocontrol heart. They are preserving their land for flora, fauna, and humans. They said the possibility to use biological controls was, quote, a bright speck of light in the horizon, end quote. They said the use of biological controls aligned with their overall goal for the ranch. It's been a true honor to develop this relationship in 2019. We monitored this year, and I was so grateful and happy to see the plants suppressed by the wasp. Major reductions since 2019. Their site is the highest elevation site in Colorado, and at around 7,500 feet, the wasp can establish. A true honor to watch these hardworking, dedicated land stewards blossom with implementing biocontrol and share their knowledge to others. A true successful story. A successful partnership developed in 2021. Emily Spencer is a natural resource specialist for National Park Service with Dinosaur National Monument. The CDA and National Park Service joined forces to implement Russian knapweed biocontrol in the park. We performed 20 releases in 2021, 100 releases in 2022. The most Russian knapweed stem gall wasps released on a U.S. river system. It was a great joint effort as Emily generated infestation maps and a plan to release wasps along the Yampa and Green River. Emily and NPS team continued to release large amounts of stem gall wasps in 2023 to 2025. The wasps are well established, and the midges are found as well. Emily and the crew are trained to release, monitor, and educate on Russian knapweed. Emily's journey started with Dan Bean in 2006 with the Tamara's Beetle program. Emily is one of the best resource managers in the country. Emily is very passionate and dedicated to preserve and heal the land. This is a great example of a successful partnership. Palisade Insectary depends on natural resource managers like Emily. We couldn't successfully expand biocontrol without resource managers like her. Many thanks to Emily and Dinosaur National Monument, NPS. Thanks so much to NASMA for the invitation. Please contact me if you would like more information. I love talking biocontrol. It's my life mission to continue to promote, distribute, and expand biological control. Currently, I'm honored to work at DOE Legacy Management Sites. They have one of the best integrated pest management programs I've worked with, and our ecologist and site maintenance team provides endless work to control non-native weeds. And with me joining the team, we're increasing our biocontrol efforts. Also, I've added the contact for the current Russian knapweed biocontrol program manager at the Palisade Insectary. I'm very grateful for Mike Reset for taking over the program and serving the agents to the people of Colorado and out-of-state users. Thank you so much. Biocontrol is the way.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was great. Next up, we have Jonathan Dyson from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department.
Thanks for the invitation. My name is John Van Dyson. I'm the team leader for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's Aquatic Habitat Enhancement Team. Today's talk will discuss about the implementation of an integrated pest management program to manage non-native aquatic vegetation while meeting the needs of multiple user groups on a small East Texas lake. So Huntsville State Park is located in southeast Texas, approximately 65 miles northwest of Houston and 6 miles southwest of Huntsville. Construction of the park began in 1937 by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the park is approximately 2,083 acres in size and home to Lake Raven. The park averages around 170,000 visitors annually, typically ranking it in the top 10 most visited state parks in Texas. There are multiple user groups that utilize the park with activities that include camping, hiking, angling. Hang on, it was advancing by itself. Paddle sports, swimming, and outreach and interpretive events. Lake Raven is a small reservoir, roughly 204 acres, surface acres in size, with a maximum depth of 28 feet. Annual water level fluctuations average around a foot, and the entire lake is a no-wake zone, limiting water activities such as skiing and wakeboarding. Angling opportunities include largemouth bass, both black and white crappie, blue and channel catfish, and a variety of sunfish species. Data collected from spring creel surveys conducted from March through May show the fisheries are well utilized, with angler effort ranging from 19,000 to just over 27,500 hours, and anglers spending between 88,000 and nearly $180,000 in these 3 months. As with many Southeast Texas lakes, Lake Raven has its share of non-native aquatic vegetation, with the most problematic species being hydrilla, giant salvinia, water hyacinth, and occasionally alligator weed. The map shows vegetation hotspots within the lake with regards to density. The warmer the color, the denser the coverage. The backs of the coves can become completely matted with aquatic vegetation at the peak of the growing season. Because of this, aquatic vegetation management efforts are required to maintain access for the numerous user groups on this water body. Historically, treatment efforts included the use of herbicides for hydrilla, giant salvinia, water hyacinth, and alligator weed on occasion. Biocontrol agents were also used, including triploid grass carp in 2009 and alligator weed flea beetles in 2014. Overall, these efforts focused on eradicating the undesired species and included large-scale herbicide injection treatments, often resulting in widespread collateral damage. You can see by the acres treated, 215, 100 acres here, and remember this was only a 204-acre water body. Smaller scale treatments were conducted to address smaller issues with giant salvinia and water hyacinth. All treatments until 2018 were conducted by the fisheries management team as their schedule allowed, and through contractors if the fisheries management team did not have time. Treatments were generally conducted once or twice a year, and as a result, aquatic vegetation went through boom or bust cycles, which led to subsequent fluctuations in fish populations, especially with largemouth bass and sunfish. Additionally, these vegetation management activities created conflicts between user groups, those being boaters and anglers, or boaters and swimmers. It should be noted that TBWD received record funding from the state legislature in fiscal year 2016, and the Aquatic Habitat Enhancement Team began fully managing aquatic vegetation on Lake Raven by 2018. The columns represented the acres covered by the various aquatic vegetation species, with actual measured coverages for each species above. These aquatic vegetation surveys were conducted during the late summer, early fall by the fisheries management team. The surveys conducted in 2013 and again in 2016 include all species present, while the remaining surveys focused on non-native species only. Hydrilla treatments were conducted in 2012, 2014, 2017, and 2018, with all but the 2017 treatments covering at or over 50% of the lake in a single treatment. The 2012 and 2014 treatments occurred before the aquatic vegetation surveys, while the 2017 and 2018 treatments were after the survey. The delay in the 18 was due to TPWD waiting on a new aquatic herbicide, Brucellacor SC, to become available for use. Giant salvinia and water hyacinth treatments were typically less than 25 acres per treatment date. These treatment efforts resulted in either an overabundance of aquatic vegetation or little to no aquatic vegetation at all, and contributed to fluctuations in the centrochord fisheries. It became obvious that a vegetation management change was needed to help decrease the pendulum shifts in aquatic vegetation coverage. Through discussions between my team, the fisheries management team, and the state park team, specific vegetation management goals were set for separate areas of the lake. An integrated pest management program was developed and focused on using all available tools in the toolbox with consideration of total cost. The new plan was not to exceed the estimated value of the fisheries from the creel surveys, and the new plan focused on plant control over eradication, even if that meant leaving some non-native aquatic vegetation left untreated. The lake was broken down by shoreline type, campsite shorelines denoted by the red lines, and non-campsite shorelines denoted by the green lines. The plan was to aggressively treat the campsite shorelines for all vegetation with little concern for collateral damage of other species. For the non-campsite shoreline, the plan was to minimize herbicide treatments and let the vegetation grow. The area along the dam, denoted in the light blue, would undergo aggressive hydrilla treatments, as this area was part of a catfish spawning structure research site. Giant salvinia and water hyacinth on the campsite shoreline, the red line, would be aggressively treated multiple times a year with either glyphosate flumioxazin or pinoxylum flumioxazin herbicide mixes. Giant salvinia weevils would be introduced behind floating booms installed to contain the salvinia and provide an in-lake weevil nursery noted by the yellow polygons. The idea was that if salvinia made it around the boom, there was a good chance it had a weevil or two on it. Finally, the remaining shoreline, the green line, would remain untreated unless large mats of salvinia or water hyacinth became present. Hydrilla management was a little more complex, as evidenced by the map. The plan was to use injection treatments of Brucellacor in all areas marked in red. This included treatments along the campsite shoreline, most of the middle cove. This is where the paddle boats are rented and the swimming area is located, and the catfish spawning structure research site along the dam, the boat lanes and coves elsewhere throughout the lake. Treatments would be conducted once a year before Memorial Day and were typically range between 30 and 41 acres depending on plant growth. Hydrilla can grow out to between 8 to 10 feet deep in Lake Raven. Non-campsite shorelines were not treated and helped separate boat anglers from other park users. The herbicide treatments of giant salvinia and water hyacinth became more frequent, while hydrilla treatments were smaller in size compared to previous management efforts. Floating booms were installed in the backs of Alligator Creek and Little Chinquapin Creek, and giant salvinia weevils were released in 2020, a total of just over 3,400, and then again in 2022, just over 92, or right at 9,200 weevils. Monitoring of the weevils was conducted throughout the year to document survival and population growth. Weevils were initially thought to die each winter. However, winter survival was documented, although at low numbers. Eventually, the salvinia contained behind the boom decreased to the point where it was not enough to collect weevil population monitoring. Additionally, extreme cold weather events and severe floods helped with our control efforts. Again, the columns represent the number of acres of each plant covered with actual coverage estimates above. As before, the fisheries management crews conducted these surveys in late summer, early fall. All aquatic vegetation species were documented in 2020 and 2022 surveys, while the remaining surveys focused on the non-native aquatic vegetation. The 2018 data I left in just to use as a reference. Giant salvinia remained present until the installation of floating boom and subsequent releases of weevils. Extreme cold weather and floods, as we had discussed, or contributed to the overall decrease as well. Water hyacinth hasn't been much of an issue after the cold weather event in winter of 2018 and has remained minimal as a result of herbicide treatments, cold weather events, and floods. Brucellacor treatments and turbid inflows have kept hydrilla below 50% coverage of the entire lake, and the goal at that time was to keep it around a 30% coverage. Post-treatment surveys show the hydrilla was still present and scattered throughout the treatment sites and only matted to the surface in the shallow areas. It appears our integrated pest management program was working and is present from year to year and doesn't limit access as it had before. Now, when preparing this talk earlier this year, we were all patting ourselves on the back. And when we came back from AFS meeting in San Antonio, we found out that the Salvinia population had really exploded this year, and we had to up our treatment efforts. But since 2020, Salvinia water hyacinth really didn't create much of an issue. The plan was to continue with the current treatment effort with Salvinia water hyacinth, maintain the floating booms, and then monitor for Salvinia weevil abundance. Future releases of Salvinia weevils will be conducted as necessary. Hydrilla has decreased overall in the Middle Cove as well as the campsite shorelines and the dam, but is still present. Boat lanes are proving difficult to create with the Priscilla core, so considerations for additional treatments or switching a contact herbicide are in discussion. Lastly, the overall treatment footprint of hydrilla will be increased as fisheries management team observes slow growth rates in largemouth bass. As new challenges present themselves, changes to this integrated pest management program will be implemented to better meet the needs of TPWD and all the user groups. And that's it.
All right, thank you so much. We'll save those questions for the end of a few more talks. We'll get them all together, so please stick around for those questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Next up, we have Jeff Littlefield with Montana State University.
Thank you for having me this morning. Yeah, while I was putting this together, I was kind of come up with a catchy little title for the for my talk, and I was actually listening to some Neil Young, and it just occurred to me that this song was very popular when I was a first-year graduate student. Now I'm kind of using it. So anyway, not only am I dating myself by using Neil Young, is I'm to the age where I might even have to explain who Neil Young is to the younger group. I want to thank some of my cooperators, both past, present, and future. Sheffy was very instrumental in getting me a lot of galls to do host testing with. The BBCA, Massimo and Francesca helped out with some of the collections for the mites I'm using for field release, especially Jenny Birdsall with MSU, who did a lot of the rearing and monitoring of the mites for releases. And for the future, I'm enlisting Melissa Maggio for future redistribution and monitoring of the mite in Montana and elsewhere. If you're not familiar with white top, it's an early flowering mustard. It's a clonal plant, reproduces by lateral roots, abundant seed production. It's abundant throughout the West, and particularly problemsome in the Great Basin area and the Mountain West, and seems to be expanding a lot of different locations. The biocontrol program has been going on for approximately about 25 years. Most of the testing has been done by Cabby Switzerland. The agents in yellow or orange have been ones that have been rejected either due to host specificity issues or lack of impact. I worked with Asaria Drabi. When the USDA ARS was in Bozeman, I kind of inherited the program from Sarah Rosenthal, who was working at the time. And this is the only agent that has been released for field release. However, there are 2 additional agents in the pipeline, Weevil for the seed pods and feeds on the seed pods, and there's a gall former that attacks the leaves and lower stem of the plant. This is being worked on with Mark Schwartzlander out of Idaho, and that's currently being reviewed by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So there's a potential for a couple other agents to be available. Seriadrabi is a fairly new project. It's an areophyid mite, so it's somewhat semi-microscopic. It's common throughout Europe. My populations came from Greece, and I also have a small population from Bulgaria, more of a high elevation site. These areophyte mites typically induce galls. This one produced galls in the flower heads primarily, and it caused these little broccoli-looking formations on the plant. They look a little bit like broccoli, but they don't taste anything like broccoli. But they also have the potential to stunt the plant as well. So we're hoping to reduce seed production and also reduce the competitiveness of the plant. This is sort of a new project for us, but a very promising project. It's very host specific and is confined primarily to the hoary-crest complex. Lepidium draba and callipens are the preferred hosts, but also will feed a little bit on a Pelianum, which is less common, and it does a little bit less on that. While we were making field releases, we did find some non-target feeding on Lepidium campestri. It's a field pepperweed. It's also exotic introduced plant, an annual species, very closely related to the hoary cress. We found galls very similar to the ones on hoary cress at one of our field sites, and when we transferred mites, we find them feeding a little bit on the leaves, forming little pocket galls, very transient in their populations. We've found them almost exclusively associated with Lepidium campestri that are growing in clumps of hoary cress. And you can see some of the hoary cress down here and this campestri plant that's growing out. So it doesn't seem to be able to sustain its population on this particular plant. Since 2019, we've made approximately 36 releases around the state, been very successful in overwintering and establishing in. About 75% of the sites have had some gall development, some more than others. We've only had about 9 sites that have failed, mostly due to management implications, herbicide use, heavy grazing. We have a few that never established due to unknown conditions, probably dry conditions, late season releases, perhaps some poor plant quality due to previous herbicide use. We've also have been able to provide consignments to Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and more recently New Mexico, and we hope to expand that to other states this coming summer. The mites themselves are very small, and when we work with them in the containment facility where I work, we transfer them one by one with using an eyelash brush. It's very tedious and not very practical for making field releases. So what we do, we've been, up until this year, been rearing the galls and the mites in the greenhouse and taking galls and releasing them into the field. And we use these teepee techniques where we tie together suitable plants and put gall materials in there. And as the galls dry out, the mites migrate into the adjacent white top plants. It's been very successful and very easy for land managers to use. We've also been looking at what we call a dispersal method, where we grind up plant gall material, put them on plants, and we've kind of modified this a little bit to mix the chopped up gall material in with a carrier such as a bran or cat litter. This has been used for phytoceid mites, predaceous mites, both in greenhouse and agricultural systems, where they either blow the mites onto the plants in the greenhouse or use these specialized drones to put them out. And so that holds some unique and novel methods for redistributing the mite in the future. We've only had the mite out in the field for about 7 years, and it's hard to make some overall recommendations or assumptions about the population development. For the most part, the mites are very good at building up populations. This is on a log scale. We have 2 sites that have been established for 7 years, and they kind of quite variable in their size. The first one, the higher one here, is the site that I had in the title slide. It's a very extensive site, high populations, and the mites have really built up populations at that site. The other site that we put out about the same year was just outside of Bozeman, and it was a very restricted site. And by year 5, nearly all the plants at the sites could be counted and were galled. The following year and the last 2 years, we've seen a significant drop in plant density at those sites. We found that almost 0 plants, except for maybe 2 along the edges, actually produce galls, and many of them have been stunted. So it's very encouraging, and we're starting to see this at other sites as well. These area phyid mice are really small, and they tend to get wind dispersed. Dispersal has been fairly limited. The first few years, the mice have stayed fairly close to where we put them out. We might find them a meter or 2 away, but after they start building up populations, they start moving out, and their movement really corresponds quite nicely with the wind movements and at the site. Last year, or actually this past summer, we found a half a mile to the north east of the site and to the west. So they're starting to move out from this site, and we've also noticed them being blown about at other sites as well, depending on the wind patterns. Since they induce galls primarily up in the flower heads, they're very effective at reducing seed production. This is percent infestation of the crown by galls, and as you go from 0 to nearly 100% of the crown being galled, quite a reduction in seed production, which is one of the things that we were hoping to accomplish. We're also seeing a lot of stunting of the plants. The picture on the left shows several plants here. I'm not sure if you can see them. They're really highly stunted, just a few inches tall. This is from our Bozeman site. You really have to look under the understory in order to find them. The photo to the right is from my Toston site, the really thick white top site. And here, all this brown material you see here are infested plant material. The plants tend to lodge over because of the amount of gall material being produced. Interestingly, you can go to these sites, and if the weather's just right, you can actually smell infested plants. They have a kind of a funny mustard smell to them, kind of a releasing of volatiles. There's a lot that goes on at the site and at the clonal level, which are that's kind of interesting, and we'll probably pursue in the future, maybe. So just a little personal note, I spent probably about 23 years off and on trying to do the host specificity testing and run the mite through the regulatory process. And it's very rewarding to be able to make a first-time release of an agent. And you're out in the field with some small petri dish of mites, and you feel quite good about putting the mites out for the first time until you look up and I realize the enormity of your task. It's not only we have this site, but there's multiple sites across the West that look as worse as this one here. But I'm quite encouraged by what we've seen with the mite over the short period of time that we've worked with it. It's a very promising biocontrol agent. Our expectations was to reduce seed production, hopefully stunt the plant to make it just a component of the understory and reduces competitibility. And I think we're starting to see that, and maybe even some slight reduction in plant density. So anyway, it's maybe not a success, but certainly a promising agent, certainly a promising future project for people. I want to acknowledge a lot of my local cooperators, also funding provided by primarily the Noxious Weed Trust Fund and APHIS, and This is actually a site at the Nez Perce Biocontrol Center. All this green stuff you see here is white top. So it's many sites like that. So if you have questions, please contact me or leave me a message in the chat. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. That was great. Yes, can enter questions in the Q&A box, or we can talk about them verbally during that session. The next group of speakers we have are going to talk about community engagement and their success stories in that. We're going to start off with Melissa Griffiths with the Madison Valley Ranchlands Group Weed Committee.
Well, good morning and thanks for having me. My name is Melissa Griffiths and I work for the Madison Valley Ranchlands Group, specifically for their weed committee. We're located just outside of Ennis and work throughout Madison County. Today, I'm going to tell you about our Madison County Biocontrol program and mainly about the partnerships and some of the relationships that we've built. But before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of history about the program and how we got here today. So a little bit about our program. Many years ago, it started out working closely with Whitehall's biocontrol program. And when I say many years, I mean probably more than 20. At one point, the program was housed through our local school district. We had a science teacher who was our field person, and they ran the program through there. At one point, it went on and it was ran by the county weed board or administered by the county weed board. And ultimately, it was incorporated and came under the umbrella of the Madison Valley Ranchlands Group and our weed committee. And that's a good fit for it, I think, for a number of reasons. Our staff, today I oversee the project, but each year we hire some students. Our goal is to have a youth crew, and so we're getting kids out in the field as young as middle schoolers, and many of them will stay throughout their high school career and sometimes even come back for a summer or two once they start college. And that's one of the big things about our program too, our education. We're getting these kids, we're starting them out in the field where they don't know much and watching them be able to communicate with adults and strangers about a variety of issues, but learning about noxious weeds and the environment. Our program is supported by the Ranchlands Group, by many grants and agreements, and we should say thanks to our partners. Because without them, we would not be able to work. Thought I'd go through, I have a lot of pictures. I like pictures. Tell you a little bit about what a year looks like, and then we're going to hone in on what the most important activities are. But our crew, we might survey and map weeds. We'll meet with land managers, and by land managers, I mean agency folks. Maybe they're range specialists or weed specialists. Ranch managers. The Madison Valley is full of agricultural lands. Some of them are managed by fourth, fifth generation ranchers. Some of them are managers that are managing large properties for non-traditional landowners. But we're meeting with land managers, all sorts. We'll collect and release bugs. We document each release and monitor. We have transects in some places. We often go back to these release sites and look for establishment. We don't just put bugs out and walk away. We're continuing that relationship with the landowner. And then also, we're gathering data, which ultimately I think is very important. We do a fair bit of outreach and education, and that looks like newspaper articles, flyers in the community. We attend youth camps and then also go to workshops and talk about biocontrol. We've tried to work on our social media because that seems to be very relevant these days. And our kids have helped us with that. We have a gal who helps us, and we've started some new social media kind of campaigns. And no surprise, people like bugs and they like to see kids. And so that's been helping us get the word out there a little bit more. But by far the most important part of our program is the connections. And what I mean by that is the relationships that we're building with these variety of land managers. And so that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. What we have found is that interested landowners do a couple of different things. They might call and ask questions. And how did they get our number? It might be because they read an article in the paper. They might have seen a flyer. In some cases, they've received a letter from the county, a letter of non-compliance telling them you have a weed problem and you need to do something. And often we're the people that they call. Often they'll stop by and pick up some materials from us. We'll give them weed ID books. We'll give them information on biocontrol. We'll give them information on varieties of treatment methods. But we're starting to build those relationships. Ultimately, if they're interested, we will go out and survey their properties, most of the time with them, which is the best. We'll often work with them to develop a plan and talk to them about what implementation looks like. And then ultimately, these are the folks that will be spreading the word about biocontrol or about noxious weeds in general. But it's the most important part of what we do and how we build these partnerships. From our standpoint, from the biocontrol program, our commitment is we will go out and help with the identification of species. A lot of the times, people don't know what they have. And just help and show them how to do that. And if they do have noxious weeds that there is a biocontrol that's available for, we've got to talk to them about their management goals. If they own a small piece of property with a spattering of weeds and want them all gone, that's probably not a place that we want to encourage them to try biocontrol. The other important thing is to help them understand what's realistic. If they have a large ranch, maybe that's thousands of acres and they want every weed gone, is that really in the budget for them with herbicide? Or do we want to talk to them about developing a multifaceted plan that might use biocontrol in some areas? We also might want to recommend herbicide in some. So we talk to them to develop, first of all, what's their management goals, right? Do they want to get rid of every single weed on their property? Or also, if one of the new things that are not new, I guess, but it feels new when you've been here for a while, is the increase in organic producers. And those are places where biocontrol might be a really great option for folks to be able to do something about their weeds while it aligns with their management goals. And then probably the thing we spend the most time talking to people about is managing their expectations. And I think it's the same for folks that are working with chemicals or biocontrol. A one-time treatment method, whether it's a 1-year release or one spray treatment, is not going to alleviate all of their weeds forever. And so managing expectations and what biocontrol really looks like, in that it's going to take a while. You might not see results for many years, or you may be able to start to see changes in the vegetation structure within a few. But to understand that once we release insects on there, not all your weeds are going to go away overnight. And so managing expectations is really, really important for us. And it's helping build that relationship with our landowners. The folks that we work with, they're going to learn a variety of things. They're going to learn how to find resources. We might teach them how to show them the apps that will help them identify plants on their property. Sometimes we're teaching them how to use the EDS Maps tool, which a lot of our grants are encouraging. And so we're going to teach them how to find that. Maybe it's not through us. Maybe they need to call the county. Maybe they need to call the Weed Control Association. But helping to show them that there's a variety of people out here that want to help them, no matter what, what specific issue they have going on related to weeds. We're going to talk to them about whether biocontrol is appropriate for their properties and their management strategies. And by appropriate, I mean, is there enough of the plant, the target weed, to support these insects? What's the location like? Is it at an elevation maybe where those bugs have a hard time establishing? Also how it fits with their overall management. Like, what are they looking for? Are they just we already talked about that, whether they want all the weeds gone right along, or if they're able to identify areas that are hard to get to. Those are a lot of the places we like to put bugs, right? And so we're gonna talk to them about all those things. We're gonna teach them how to monitor, how to take photo plots if they would like. Sometimes we help put in transects. Also in the spring, a lot of the times we'll go back and revisit some of those release sites, and they'll come out with us and help us pull plants and look for larvae. Or teach them in the summer when it's hot, how they can find those bugs or maybe signs of feeding on the plants. And those are all good feedback mechanisms for our landowner to be able to find out, hey, that plant, those bugs made it through the winter. Look at what they're doing. And then lastly, the people that we work with, the most cool thing is that they spread the word. I'll get calls from folks saying, hey, Julie says you've released bugs and her place is looking good and she's pretty excited about it. And I want to see if my place might be a good spot for biocontrol. And lastly, why do we think it works? Because philosophically, these resources are limited. And so it makes us feel successful to thoughtfully allocate those bugs, right? There's not an endless supply of biocontrol. And so we want to make sure that we're taking those limited resources and thoughtfully putting them out there. They take a lot of work to get. And so we don't want to just give them to folks who don't have the right species, right? Or maybe the right landscape. And then also the buy-in that we're getting from the landowners is super important. We're recording data. Ultimately, that's contributing to the body of knowledge about biocontrol and whether it's successful and where things have been going well. We're also cultivating interest and buy-in, and we're educating. Education. And the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because this is my favorite picture that I've probably ever taken in the field. I want to tell you why. First, I love Sipho. It's my favorite bug. Obviously, he's just the coolest ever. And so it's a great picture of the bugs, but it's a better picture of the river and of the valley. The Madison Valley is such a treasure. And so this picture really, to me, is like what it's all about. But then when you look a little bit closer on the right side of the screen, what do you see? You see the people. And let me tell you about these people. This is two folks that are part of an HOA. It's an HOA where the lots are about 20 acres. But the cool part is they're the ones who heard about biocontrol, read an article, called me. My crew went out and looked and said, yeah, there's some good spots to release bugs. And so we went out and we were able to release bugs on 3 or 4 different places that day. And the coolest part, and this is what success looks like to me, is it's the people who showed up, who cared, who invested not just their money or their time, but they invested in learning about the problem and to actually doing something that can affect it long term. And so the success to me looks like this: these two people that are engaged, They're educated and they're out releasing bugs, not even on their property, but on one of their neighbors, with permission. Anyway, that's the biggest take home for me is building these long-term relationships with people who care about the issue and that are going to help continue to spread the word. So thank you very much and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Melissa. That was great. Those guys are cute. I haven't seen that insect before. They're very cute. Next up we have Ray Mooney with the City of Port Aransas, and they're going to talk about Brazilian pepper tree.
Thank you, Megan. So yeah, my name is Ray Mooney. I work for the City of Port Aransas. I'll show you guys a map here in a little while where that is. We are on the Gulf Coast of Texas in South Texas. The Texas Gulf Region Cooperative Weed Management Area began in 2014. It was a partnership with the City of Port Aransas, Texas A&M Forest Service, and the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center at the University of Texas at Austin. So we're a regional partnership to address the invasive Brazilian pepper tree. So the Brazilian pepper tree, here's some pictures, close up of what it looks like, and then a picture on the bottom of really the forefront of that photo is what our habitat would be here on the Barrier Islands, a Gulf Coast prairie. And the pepper trees, being invasive, will take over and form these dense thickets. Native to Brazil and other South American countries, was brought here as a ornamental, and all the sort of warm climate states are having issues with Brazilian pepper tree. Florida, California, Hawaii, Texas. They get pretty big if you don't have any cold weather that winter. They don't tolerate freezes or cold temperatures too good, so they haven't really moved inland on Texas. In Texas, but really prevalent here on the coast where it's warmer. They secrete chemicals into the soil so that don't allow other species to grow, and they grow really fast, as with most invasives. I did some looking at through some old newspaper articles, found it in the valley of Texas, so near the border. In the 30s, people called it Christmas berry. They were making wreaths out of it, and found some things in our paper here in the 1980s displaying it in yards of the month, but really in the early 2000s is when people started to notice that it was a problem. We went through a pretty long period of time without any major freezes, so that's probably what allowed it to really just grow exponentially. So the cooperative weed management area, I don't think is really a term that's like used anymore, but these were partnerships with all types of government and agencies and universities, and we work together to work on our properties. So we have MOUs where each partner is able to work on the other partner's property. We have this one single focus of this species, the Brazilian pepper tree. We have a long-term commitment that we're each, signing these MOUs that will be committed to working within this partnership, and we have our distinct boundaries, and we help each other write grants and work on projects together for control, outreach, and public engagement. So, okay. Well, here is our mission is, as I mentioned, we're on the Barrier Islands. I think there's a map coming up, so I'll show you that for people from all over. So these cities probably don't mean anything to you. But yeah, we are working, our first goal is integrated management. So removal, treatment, monitoring, and we've recently added biocontrol with Megan, our moderator. Goal 2, restoration. Goal 3, outreach and education. And 4 is just administration. So here are all our partners. We have federal agencies, The Padre Island National Seashore is a part of the National Park Service. So we have national parkland. We have a Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, which is under Fish and Wildlife. We have a state park. We have all of our city nature preserve land, the University of Texas at Austin, nonprofits like the Coastal Bend Bays and Estuaries Program, the Texas Invasive Species Institute, the Port of Corpus Christi joined recently, and then of course, Texas A&M Forest Service. So here's the map of where we're located. So this is considered the coastal bend of Texas, but our northernmost extent is San Jose Island. This is, and then the island that Port Aransas is on is Mustang Island, and then the Padre Island National Seashore. And as mentioned already, some of the property ownerships, besides all of those federal, state, county, city, we have obviously a lot of private land. Actually, San Jose Island is completely privately owned. And it's about 230,000 acres in size. The habitats are coastal prairie and grasslands, dune habitats, and then developed and impacted lands. So for our first about 9 years of our program, we had outreach, more than 200 man hours, thousands of outreach materials delivered. We've done mail outs. We've mailed to every, mailing address in town. We've put things on our trash bills, water bills, gas bills, information about pepper trees. We go to events and hand out flyers, farmers markets, festivals. And we do community work days where we invite the public to come help us. We'll remove a small area. So we've had over 800 man hours, and improving basically the entire acreage of our area and directly treating over 300 acres. So here's just some examples of our outreach. So as mentioned, we've created flyers where we're directly telling the people how to remove the pepper trees, what herbicides to use. We go out to festivals, we go meet landowners, sit at our nature preserve sites and talk to people. Here's some examples of our community work days. We've even gone onto private land and helped people remove the pepper trees and teach them how to do it, as well as just doing the work for them. Since that's a barrier for a lot of the people around here, we have an older population, and to be able to go there and just help them remove the trees has been very successful. We recently, this was just like 2 weeks ago, we had a really fun event called Eat the Invasives. We actually did a similar event about 10 years ago. And this one was really fun. We ate invasive species. We sent an invitation to everyone in Port Aransas. So we had lionfish, Asian tiger prawns, nalgai, and we made a Brazilian peppercorn sauce, and we put a honey vinaigrette on the salad. So this was a really fun way to get people out. People showed up that, just were excited about trying the lionfish. To be honest, that was a big draw, and got to learn a little. We gave away giveaways and information on pepper tree. Okay, so here's some of the contractual work. So this was an area where we mechanically removed about 150 acres of Brazilian pepper tree and then followed up with herbicides. So you can see it really got overtaken with the this tree, and trying, to get your grassland prairie back. Here's a cool project that we did where we removed from homeowners. And then we replaced with these, the lower middle picture is native Texas trees being delivered to homeowners. And then we planted a native tree. So it's very hot here. People like the shade of the pepper tree. So this was a good project because we removed it, but we immediately replaced it with a fairly large tree. So we were able to do 32 private properties, and 17 of them wanted a native tree for replaced, and we removed about 250 of these trees. Here's just some more projects. Again, like what before we, looking at the time, we've done a lot of work in the nature reserve that I manage, just kind of delineating here. All the pepper tree just grows so fast. So this was another project where we worked on about 67 acres and were able to mechanically and chemically treat them in this area. And then we worked on the other side of the nature reserve the year after, treating about 20 acres. These projects, some of them are a little tricky because we had to walk out on small trails to get out to the upland areas within the marsh system of where these pepper trees are growing. Some of these islands out there in the marsh are also privately owned. And so we have this constant seed source of pepper trees growing out in these isolated areas. So it's been a real challenge. So the next slide, so this is, and then Megan and Demian. Demian's an entomologist, that's a part of our group. Feel free to chime in, but so the reason we were invited to this is we started working with Megan on biological control. So the Army Corps of Engineer Research Development Center, Forest Service are working on our city property, releasing the Brazilian pepper tree thrip, which is our first attempt to add in biological control to our toolbox. This insect is native to Brazil, and it's been studied in Florida, and for the last 2 decades, they have their permit from APHIS. They have been proven to show severe reduction of Brazilian pepper tree. They eat the new growth and flowers. They're rearing them up at the facility Megan works out in Louisville and down at the USDA lab. And we started releasing these in 2020 and currently applying for more funding to continue this work. Interestingly, the bugs do not seem to be dealing well with our heat here in Texas. I guess the tropical rainforest is not as hot as it is here. So, but Megan has some results. Do you want to say anything about it? Or about for this project that are interesting to continue working on?
Yeah, we're just gonna kind of see if we can do an IPM strategy in the cooler months of the year, see if we can figure out a way to still utilize these insects.
And so I guess just to finish it off, again, just with our group, we've focused so much on trying to get the public to identify these plants and remove them, but we've also been working with the Forest Service and the Arbor Day Foundation to give away free native plants. And so we started getting this grant from Arbor Day as a result of Category 4 hurricane that hit us directly, Hurricane Harvey. And so they fund to disaster areas these tree grants. And they supported us for 8 years, which was really amazing. We also had a really bad freeze in 2021, so they continued that support. But it's been amazing because we've been able to provide outreach on the Brazilian pepper tree. But then if people show up, we've given over 4,000 trees away. And it's a good initiative and incentive for people to plant a Texas native. We haven't given any trees away that weren't natives, and really emphasize the importance of that to the public. And there's Megan, there's doing some releases of the thrips, just really trying to keep up and maintain that engagement. As of lately, we've been rearing up our outreach efforts a lot, which was in large part due to adding the biological control to our toolbox, because we really wanted people to understand that we're doing this, why we're doing it, and ask questions, because people have our automatic response with the biological control has been like they're scared. So it's been great. We've attended a lot of farmers markets and events lately, and we've gotten a really good response and been able to talk to people about it and invite them out to help as well. So, okay, I guess that's it.
Thanks, Ray. That was great. So next up is Carl Jorgensen with the U.S. Forest Service, Forest Health Protection, talking about skeleton weed, rush skeleton weed.
All right. Well, thank you. I was excited to come in and talk to you guys about rush skeleton weed and what we've been doing here, a little bit of its history. I'm actually filling in for my entomologist, Anna Webb, so I got to give her credit for the slides. And then I know Joy Milan also helped out with her. But let's get into it and what we've been doing and some of the successes we've been having. So, the Forest Health Protection Program, I'm just going to make a little distinction from where we sit with the rest of the Forest Service. We're in the state, private, and tribal forestry division, and we're basically the ones that hand out funds to all the non-Forest Service groups. Carol Randall was part of our outfit for quite a while and was pretty instrumental, and now we picked up some of her duties. But so a lot of the funds that have come out to some of these groups have funneled through the state and private programs. What we really try to do within our program is make everything run smooth, help connect dots, coordinate across state lines, across regions, across partners, and have an overall effort. And we really miss Carol in this aspect of that, is that we're down several people, as Aaron mentioned at the beginning of the summit here today. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what we're dealing with here at Southern Idaho and rush skeleton weed. If you're not familiar with rush skeleton weed, it is a biennial or perennial, lives in our foothills here, pretty dry country. It's kind of a scraggly looking plant. It's got these little yellow flowers. It's got a pretty decent taproot and lives in some pretty harsh locations. When you cut them open, you get all this latex all over you, similar to some of our other weeds. It's spread wide and far. And now in 18 states, Canadian provinces. There was also issues in Australia. It's displaced in native natural areas. Hence it's on our list of weeds that we deal with here in the West. Over the years, there's been biocontrol agents that have been released on it. I'm not going to talk about the mite or the midge or the fungus any more than wherever we seem to have skeleton weed in the West or in Idaho for sure. Those three agents have spread as fast as the weed is spreading. They all have their pros and cons. But that's not the star of our show today. So we're going to talk about Bradyroa geoluvia. It's a root-feeding moth. I like this. If you go look into the books, you can see pictures of this, and it has very distinct banding on its hind wings that help identify it. But I like this picture a little bit better on the top right, just because once these guys live in the field for a little bit, they get beat up and they lose their banding, and they're not quite as easy to see, and they kind of become a nondescript grayish white moth. It sometimes takes a little bit of an eye to catch that banding and help identify which one this may be, as opposed to one of our bigger forest pests is western spruce bloodworm that we sometimes catch and see when we're out there looking for this moth here. Its impacts to the plant are in the larval stage, and I don't have pictures of that because honestly in the field we don't see it very often unless we really go digging. The larvae feeds on the side of the root, doesn't really dig into it. The best way to identify it is it just looks like another little dirt patch stuck to the side of the root. So it's not as easily identifiable unless you really know what you're looking for. So we try to keep the identification to it, to the adult and what we see. So the history on the Bradyroa is it was released nearly 25 years ago, and I want to see up in this general vicinity. There has been lots of rush skeleton weed research right in this little corridor in the central of Idaho. That's what the purple arrow is pointing at. The red on the Idaho map is all the areas that have brush skeleton weeds. So where we have this thing established now, is in the heart of our skeleton weed, and it seems to be moving, and we're helping it move along. So anyway, the initial release site was here at this Wildlife Canyon Scenic Byway, and we have since moved our collection site down the road just a little bit, mostly because of the lack of skeleton weed in that area. Now that is roughly a mile, and so the skeleton weed moth has a long ways to go to get into the rest of Idaho. So the time frame of the collection and distribution has been decades. And prior to that, it was a decades of research developing and getting this moth to the release stage. And with Jeff Littlefield is on here, as well as several others who had helped in that effort. So it's kudos to those guys back in, I'm gonna say, the beginnings of their career. But the interesting thing, and then this is where patience pays off with biocontrol. We had about a decade where we couldn't find them. We weren't even sure they were there. Right after, we had several releases. Some at one point we were releasing with paintbrushes and neonate larvae down to the individual plants. Jeff and Joey and maybe a couple others on this call, I had dug and transplanted plants that had bradyroa on them, and it was still 10 years. We just about gave up on this, and then we found some, and then they boomed, and now that's where we're at now, and we were forced to move our collection operations down the road a little bit. But this site gives you a general look about how our skeleton weed infestations look. It's most of that green stuff in front of the sagebrush. That is all kind of straggly up. Our collection methods is to grab either the net, or the woman on the left has a very large aspirator, and we basically flush them up out of the weed patch, chase them around, and then suck them into the tube, and then blow them into a cup. It is one of the more unique experiences that I've had as an entomologist trying to collect these things. We've used other aspirators in the past for other agents that are 1/10 the size of these things that we have now, but it is just one of the more unique experiences that there is. And it was really fun to get some of these other weed managers or the public, who else comes to our collections days, and at first they kind of look at you with these cross eyes about this is really how we do it. And every year we tell them that if you have a better way of collecting these, we are all ears. But currently this is the collection method that we're using. Well, they're on the bottom right, you can see where we suck them into that tube and then blow them into the cups. There's a really tight window for these guys. It took us a couple years to figure out when we were first initially doing this. It's kind of a sweet window in late June to early July. If you get past early July, one of the bigger issues we run into is grasshoppers. And the grasshoppers have their wings, and they will mess with us as far as when we're trying to collect them. They will basically scare the bradyroa up and out of our reach. And so it makes it a little more difficult to sort out the bradyroa from the grasshoppers when we're trying to chase them down through it. In southern Idaho, our really concentration was to first get all our areas established and released in southern Idaho. One of the experiences I would say is with any of these new releases, when you're talking with partners, they often say, or sometimes they say, that they have really bad rust skeleton weed infestations. What I learned in that first year was we gave and put a bunch of effort into collecting these, gave them to some cooperators, and the following year we went and looked and see how bad their infestation was, and it was nearly the population that we were really described to for good population establishment from what we thought it would be. So I would just say, as anything in these first couple releases and distribution days, to, if you can, check on those locations, because different people's perception of what a bad rush skeleton weed situation is will vary. But these things still haven't been in high demand, and we'll be continuing that. So just for some perspective, the last 2 years, we've collected almost 1,500 moths each year, 1,900 2 years ago and 1,200 the prior year. We usually shoot for at least 500 when we've initially started doing this. We did a project with Jeff Littlefield and others, and really came up with, we need to collect 500 moths to release at a site. Now, the reason for this number, and it's a little bit of a nuance, probably 90% of the moths that we collect in the field are males. So we have to collect a lot more. The nice thing is, and it seems to hold true in most locations, is after we release these at least 500 in a location, typically the next year or the year after, we can find established moths and get establishment, or at least confirm establishment for the next year. Okay. One of the things is that they are pretty active, so I was always amazed inside the cup. You'll hear them and how durable they are. One of the nice things we have with this is getting a lot of different folks in the field. The last couple of years, we've targeted the Utah Weed Supervisor Association. Amber from Utah has come up and has done some really nice public outreach in Utah, and with the weed superintendents down there, and getting a population established in that area. But it's also a good opportunity to get a lot of these other folks in the field to work together and make some of these connections of what some of the issues they may be dealing with as well. So this next year, we're planning to do it again at end of June, early July. If you're interested, we do not give these out for free. However, you can come and collect as many as you want, and we will get you outfitted as much as you want and help you as much as we can. But it's a little bit time consuming, and you kind of need an army to really get those done and get them done in a day, and then get turned around and off to the four corners of the West where you may be releasing them. And with that, there's Anna's contact and my contact, and then Joey has also helped out quite a bit too.
Great, thank you so much. There we go. Next up, we have the last one before we take questions and a quick break. We have Rodrigo Diaz from Louisiana State University.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Naisma, for this opportunity. Decembers are always fun because we do have this workshop. So in this afternoon, I'm going to chat a little bit about the idea of using social media. And with that, I definitely need to thank the help of Veronica Manrique from Southern University, that we have been brainstorming ideas about how we can communicate with our audiences. So let's chat about social media. Now, I bet every single one of you has a phone in front of you right now. So it's this idea that, phones are a part of our lives. And the idea is how we can use better this to promote the use of biocontrol, engage with our community, and eventually, of course, share the visibility of the programs that we do. So we're going to be chatting about specifically, we have been playing with Instagram. Okay. In terms of, what is our audiences, and is a diverse group of stakeholders that we're working with. Think about the scientific community, educators, policymakers, right? As well as other colleagues, other people that are in the field, and also funding agencies. And you're going to see some examples of how many people are already using social media as a method of communication. Of course, in my case, we have a research program, and I'm very interested in recruiting undergraduate students as well as graduate students interested in working in research. And we know this audience is very active on social media. So think this diverse group of stakeholders that we can engage. I'm going to tell you a little bit more the aquatic area, right? I work a lot with aquatic weeds. So you can find local, state, and federal agencies already with Instagram accounts. I work with water. So there's companies doing water resource management, wetland management, plenty of agencies doing wetland restoration. So start thinking, right, how these different agencies communicate with their audiences. I have people, interested in mosquito abatement agencies because these aquatic weeds harbor mosquitoes. Hydroelectric companies, you guys know that they spend a little bit of money maintaining those water bodies. So eventually they are on social media, right? And what it has been very interesting for us is knowing that many of them are following other agencies, and eventually you get to know this network of people that could be interested in the work that you do. And with that, I would like to invite you to think about who are your stakeholders, and perhaps many of them are using social media. In terms of what we post in our page, we do research publications, we have manuals, as well as, fact sheets. And we create links on Instagram, so people click on them and eventually they go to our website to have access to the full content. So we think that Instagram, in fact, is helping us driving people into our pages, right, with more content. And you guys have seen that in these presentations, we generate a lot of content. For example, in this case, our infographics. You know that people and many of our audiences, they love these graphics. Here is one about Chinese tallow tree. The other infographic is about actually how to release Salvinia weevils. So we're using Instagram again to communicate and deliver these tools more effectively, right? Disseminate the work that we're already creating in our programs. And then sometimes we just have general activities. We go to these beautiful places. People are doing some action shots. Here is the people, working with the wetlands, putting some weevils on the Salvinia, or here is the work of Veronica with their potato, coral, and artesia. Anytime we're in the field and we recognize that we're working in these beautiful natural habitats, having a good time most of the times. So why not posting about that? In terms of research, there's really cool, in biocontrol, we have this beautiful before and after, and they have a really clear message. In this case, it's the work of a potato, what happens with the vine, what is the impacts, and then very clear, simple messages that we can spread using pictures. And something that you can notice is it doesn't take too much time to prepare these kind of observational pictorial ways to describe these stories. We also post the job opportunities. These young people, especially, that I'm trying to hire for the work in the summer, for example. So we post jobs. Sometimes we travel to meetings and we get a chance to visit beautiful places. So we communicate, that we're having a good time as we engage in our work on invasive species and biocontrol. And also, we post fun activities. And this is something, that with the kids, we engage in outreach activities or extension. And we have these events in different ways, right? So in these cases, we have what is called here the Ag Magic Week. And we have all these schools coming to the Ag Center. And the kids get a chance to visit every department here in the LSU. And one of them is our laboratory. And we're very lucky that, our students, graduate students, get a chance to explain to these kids what is biocontrol, what is a weevil, what is giant salvinia. So we'll be really excited to see how these kids eventually will be our advocates. But in terms of posting, this has been, again, I imagine to think basically how we can create this content, right? In my lab, it's a research lab in a university. So I have a lot of students and they are graduate students doing tremendous work. So we're very proud and, we post their successes. They go to meetings, they give presentations, and in many cases, hopefully they earn awards. And here's pictures, from the Entomological Society meeting. So it's very important for our lab. And I see, many of my students very excited to share this news. So I think it's very important that they get a chance to pause. Hey, this is, what I'm getting. This is how I'm building my career. And they want to pause that. So I say, hey, why not? This is, the lab is growing thanks to you. So why not? Let's post it on Instagram. Here, I would like to show other labs that are doing Instagram. And I just here I have a post from the Aquatic Wetland Plant Science Lab in University of Florida. Outstanding and very creative ways to make posts. For example, with short videos, some of them are really funny. If you see this one, you're going to be laughing. I think I have watched it maybe 10 times and I still laugh about it. And it's about biocontrol. And then you have other posts from the Montana Biocontrol, just beautiful, creative, and more importantly, we show the love that we have for the discipline. Of course, we know we have challenges, but in this process, we're growing, I will say, as a community, and in that process, we want to share that with other people. And of course, there is other terrific accounts that you can follow, that they have fun content, very informative about invasives. In this case, will be the Florida Native page, with it's very terrific. So whenever we see this post, we just repost it and create more traffic into our social media account. Now, there's also more fun things that we do, like you guys have seen throughout these presentations. We love the discipline. And in this process, we create content. In this case, it's art. So we have a post, for example, here about the new lab t-shirt about gold weevils, and you see the weevil on top of the giant salvinia. And, the students wanted to brag about it. And this one, I think we posted a couple of years ago about you see the salvinia weevil in surrounding this salvinia ball for the Christmas decoration. And that one, one of my undergrad students, in fact, came up with this phrase, protecting wetlands one weevil at a time. So the weevil is tiny, but it has a tremendous impact. But I'm very happy that, Emily came up with this phrase, and now the new lab t-shirt has this phrase. Needless to say, when you show up this in the field and your colleagues see this and people you're in the field, they are like, I want that t-shirt. One day I'm going to be able to sell these and get more funds to our program to keep doing more outreach. But yeah, they could be quite popular. Now, a little bit about how we do it on Instagram. There is videos, there is YouTube videos that you can use it, but we have stories, reels, posts, live, and so on. There's different ways to do it. Usually my favorite is posts. And there's something that is really cool is that we all have stories that we want to tell. We just need to keep them simple. And I like, we brainstorm with Veronica sometimes and the other team members, what is the simplest story that we want to tell? Maybe it's about the insect feeding on the leaf, or that we found the insect in the field, but they're simple stories, right? We don't have to explain a whole set of stories. It's the simple stories that are fun, meaningful, and you have some, and we do know that we're really good at pictures, and so we can share that. So Instagram has been for us a really easy platform to share content, and yeah, so really user-friendly, I will say. But yes, I think I need to get better to doing some reels with short videos, but definitely I will get more time and practice, but there are some people that are so creative of doing this stuff. But yeah, we can do this for biocontrol. Here is a picture of a post that is one of the last posts on Instagram, and this is a story that we went to El Salvador, and you see the infestation of water lettuce in this lake. We took the team, and the story is precisely, the description of where we did this, the purpose of the trip, and the location. So it was really fun. It's a picture. It has a story with other pictures there, but I want to tell you this. The content is simple. You don't want to put them text tremendously. It's simple stories, right? It's simple messages that take the point A to point B. And also it's very important, for example, the tagging, what people you want to see, what is visible. This wetland precisely is part of the Ramsar, is one of these groups of very important wetlands in the world. So you can see there that we tag the word Ramsar, right? to see if we can drive more people interested in seeing this story. We tag the name of the country. There is a hydroelectric company that operates this and so on. But with this, I would like you to think, what type of tagging or what type of key phrases you think that is going to be helping you to bring more people, bring attention to the post that you're making. Who does this? Believe it or not, I have a team of awesome young people, very creative. They love to do it. They have already Instagram and they are very creative. So it's my students in the lab, and then we say, let's do it every 2 weeks and came up with content. But as long as we have a coordination, what type of messages, how we can keep simple, and that's something fun to all of us to think, how we can brainstorm and where is the core of the story that you want to explain in such a way that is simple, and what is the type of illustration that better portrays the message that you want to communicate. And with that, there's a final message. And the message is this. I think social media is helping biocontrol and in general invasives to share our work, right? I think it builds trust, express the knowledge, and I think more importantly, from the beginning of this conversation has been to do this, connect with the people that are actually receiving our efforts. In this case, I wrote it, that connect us with those who matter the most. And with that, you're going to be bombarded with a bunch of pictures, so be ready, okay? Look, this is a bunch of our posts that we have been doing in the last year. And definitely, I want to thank you for your attention, and you can follow us in those accounts or Instagram. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. That was great. And thank you very much to all of the presenters in the first half of the summit. I really enjoyed it, and I'm assuming everybody else did as well. So now we want to take a few minutes to do a live question and answer section before we have a break and then start our second half. So there were a couple questions in the Q&A about what CABI is. And so I'm not going to actually invite a presenter to join us at the moment. I'm going to invite Philip Weil, the head of weed biocontrol at CABI Switzerland and co-chair of the NASEMA Biocontrol Committee, to just give us a quick introduction to CABI.
That's great. Thanks so much, Melissa. And I just want to say thanks to all of the presenters. It's been a fantastic last couple of hours of presentations. So I don't want to steal too much of your time, but just to introduce CABI. So we are a not-for-profit intergovernmental organization established by United Nations treaty-level agreement. And in the research that we do as an organization, we address issues of global concern, and one of those is invasive species. And the research that I'm involved with in the group in Switzerland is mainly focused around weed biocontrol, but we also do insect biocontrol as well. So just as a background to the Swiss Center, so we were started in 1948 as a substation of the Commonwealth Bureau of Biological Control. And in the early days, we were really working we were studying forest pests, but since the 1960s, that changed emphasis more to weeds and invasive insect species. Since we started, we've released 51 agents, or we've been involved in the research to release 51 agents in North America, and several of those you've heard about today, and that's been fantastic. So yeah, thank you, Melissa, very much for the opportunity to present CABI. There's in the answer box, there is a link to our website if you're interested for more information, or feel free to shoot me an email. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. That was great. Our next question is for Jeff Littlefield, and that is, what steps are taken to revegetate the white top release sites after control is achieved? Or after you see impact? Maybe we shouldn't say control yet, right?
Yeah, right now we're kind of to the phase where we're just putting out the mites into these sites. So we're not really looking at too much for revegetation. One frustrating thing that I have when doing first-time releases is that not only are we dealing with white top, often these sites are highly degraded. So we're looking at more of a species complex of different weeds. So even though you get rid of white top, you have to contend with Canada thistle or other weedy mustards. So it's really frustrating. Revegetation and biocontrol, I think that's probably a complicated topic to discuss. There's a number of steps to go into revegetating a site, trying to determine what your goals are, current land management use, and what you might have for competing vegetation. For my white top sites, sites are kind of variable where you have good grass species present, often some perennial grasses, they tend to come back. Other areas that are more open, you wind up with cheatgrass. So it really depends upon, at my sites, grazing intensity and timing is quite critical. And there's often steps you can do to, other than biocontrol, to reduce your weeds at the site to improve the establishment of native or competing vegetation. Hopefully maybe there's other people who have had more experience working in revegetation and biocontrol. I know a lot has been done with areas, or at least in Montana, of revegetating forested sites that have been burnt over, and trying to retain a lot of the competitive vegetation to exclude weed invasion. So I'm sorry I don't have any specific steps that we've been going through. I think as we get agents established, those are the type of topics, how to integrate biocontrol into broader management strategies, and not only with weed control, but with management of grazing, timing, intensity, things of that sort. So maybe somebody else can chime in or have some experience, but I hope that answers some of your questions. There are various guidelines that you can get online. For example, I might post the link to this revegetation guidelines for Western Montana. It's pretty good publication to talk about revegetation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. And yeah, I would invite anybody that has experience with revegetating after biocontrol to go ahead and add an answer to that question in the question and answer box. We're happy to hear from a variety of practitioners on their experience. That's how we all learn. So our next question is for Carl Jorgensen, and it is, do you have some guesses as to why it took the moth quite some time to establish, and how that plays into their continued success since 2016?
Sure. I think there's kind of a couple different factors that were going on. One is right after the moths established, their population was so low, they just were not easy to find. When we first really found them, the population was already pretty well established. There was a little swale a couple 100 yards away that they seemed to concentrate in, but I really caution against that being some sort of microclimate that they may have established over there, or they just happened to be that in that location when we finally caught up with the monitoring of the population. The second factor is just getting familiar with the moth and learning to identify it and when to find it in the field. I think that also played into it. When we first started looking, our monitoring was a little later in the summer, complicated by what I mentioned earlier was grasshoppers, but also I think some of the moths had already dispersed by then. I think we had a little better luck finding them right as they emerged up from out of the soil a little earlier in the summer. So that's why our collection days have moved up to that kind of that sweet spot at the end of June.
Great.
Uh,
Thank you, Carl. Oh, did you
yeah.
have something else? Sorry.
Oh, let's say I thought it was something else about since 2016. One of the things we're also seeing now is they're moving across the landscape, and once they denude the skeleton weed in an area, we may have to start looking at additional locations for our collection. So, just part of the game that happens. One thing I didn't mention in the presentation that got us a little nervous a few different times is fire has been quite active in southern Idaho, and this year we'll see if we're going to get a flush of skeleton weed because we had a fire burn over our part of our collection site as well as a dozer line. So we'll see if that is going to put a reflush of skeleton weed in the area and hold the moths there for a little longer or not. But that's a observation for the next couple of years.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
To start our second half, we are going to talk about collaborative successes. And we have Todd Brettenfeld from Jefferson County Weed District.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Todd Breitenfeld from Jefferson County Weed District, Southwest Montana. Jefferson County is just north of Madison County that we heard about earlier. And let's get started. So I'm talking about the Whitehall Biocontrol Project. And this little talk's called Just Another Pretty Flower, which is where we're heading with these weeds, we hope. This is spotted knapweed flower with a Siphocoleona cicades, also my favorite insect, happily resting on it. So a little bit about me. I was a high school science teacher in Whitehall for 30 plus years. First interview, first job, never left, now retired. I have a BS in forestry from U of M in Missoula. I have an MS in entomology from MSU in Bozeman, where Jeff Littlefield is a professor. And I've been the coordinator of the Whitehall Biocontrol Project from 1993 to the present. I've also co-authored the first and second editions of the Montana Biocontrol Guide, second edition with Melissa. Okay, so in Big Sky Country, Montana, we have big weeds and it takes a lot to pull them out. No, actually, I'm pictured in blue. And this is a Montana Weed Control Association annual meeting, and it's a team building event. On the right is how we actually pull weeds in Montana. This is one of my high school students pulling a spotted knapweed for transplanting into our insectary. Notice he's doing it right with gloves and long sleeve shirts. So, part of the Whitehall Biocontrol Project is we have an insectary, an insect garden, a weed garden. And in that, at this time, we're dealing with insects. We're mass rearing insects for spotted knapweed, yellow toadflax, Russian knapweed, and we just started working with Jeff on the white-top mites. So on the right is our classroom students who get to come out of the classroom and collect weevils. And on the left are some of my summer crew having fun playing with Photoshop. And they have vials of the knapweed seedhead weevil that we no longer move around because they are everywhere in the area now. One of the many successes that's happening in Montana with biocontrol. So just to kind of review the message that I and our crew are putting out, as we all know, a weed is any plant that grows where we do not want it to grow. This dandelion in someone's yard. But if someone is growing it for a nice tasty salad, it would not be considered a weed. A noxious weed, and that's what's in the background of this slide. This is the basal rosette of a spotted knapweed, noxious weed, is any plant that causes environmental and or economic damage or has the potential to do so. So here is leafy spurge in the background. And one of the biocontrol agents, the red-headed stem and root boring beetle that we work with. And this insect also is everywhere in our area, so we have stopped collecting them because we find them everywhere. Okay, so we use biocontrol when we've given up trying to eradicate a noxious weed. We said, okay, it's here to stay. I often use the analogy that we could import the whole population of India to Montana, have them pull all the spotted knapweed plants for 5 years, and they still wouldn't get them all, plus the soil seed bank, they would resprout. So we're to the point whenever we use biocontrol, we've said we give up with eradication and we want control. What we're trying to do with biocontrol agents is to biomimic the natural control systems of the weed's continent of origin. For most of our weeds in Montana anyway, that's Eurasia. In other words, we want to make that weed just another pretty flower like this Dalmatian toadflax down in the corner and one of the biocontrol agents munching on it. Okay. The Whitehall Biological Control Project started in 1993 from a desire I had to include real science dealing with a real problem, a real life problem in my curriculum. For example, we had a weekly report called the Weed of the Week or the Invasive Species of the Week, and the students would pick a weed or invasive species each week and present a report on that. In the summer, and this is the main focus of the Whitehall Project, we hire high school students, and some of them also continue on into college, and we also have hired an AmeriCorps volunteer lately. And their function is to educate landowners about integrated weed management, IWM, mass rear bioagents for release from our insectary, collect bioagents for redistribution, and of course, monitor the bioagent's effectiveness and spread. Okay, so here's a picture of one summer crew. We're at our base at Whitehall High School. We're using the county weed district truck, and we're ready to go out and deal with these weeds and insects. Okay, and here's some of the great places we get to collect. This is on Rock Creek, a blue ribbon trout stream, and we are collecting yellow toadflax stem boring weevils. And of course, we have a container head. If you're working with kids and you don't laugh at least once an hour, you might not be doing it right. Here we're collecting leafy spurge flea beetles in central Montana, near a place where a Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton was being excavated. Pretty cool, the stuff we get to do here in Montana. These two students are married. She's an elementary teacher. He's an engineer. She's a dental hygienist, and I think she works in X-rays technician as these students grow up and move on. But now I want to talk about the economic value that we have produced. Okay, so each container holds 100 SIFO, the knapweed root boring weevil, and that's worth about $100, $120 depending on the market. So the insects that we have collected and redistributed or mass reared and redistributed, if we had sold them on the open market at the going rate for that year, we've now surpassed $1.4 million worth of insects that we've given out for free. We just ask landowners to make voluntary donations, and many do. The educational value we feel that we have produced is even greater than that. And we feel that the decreased use of the other integrated weed management strategies, such as going out and hand pulling knapweed or using herbicides, is also a huge value and worth mentioning. So we also cooperate with numerous research and other projects in our area. One of the projects we worked with was USDA APHIS leafy spurge flea beetle research. Here's an area where the leafy spurge is decreasing in density and being damaged by the insects. Here's the flea beetles that have almost completely defoliated the plant, and note all the dead stems in the background. Here's a close-up of the actual flea beetles and a larva who does the most damage, munching on the roots. We also work with Canada thistle rust fungus studies. And one of the students with their trusty Dobbenmeyer frame taking some data on those research sites. We deal with Dalmatian and yellow toadflax research. Here's a gall, unfortunately chewed off by mice of this insect, and here's another stem insect inside the stems of yellow toadflax in our insectary. Another example of things that we do, a teacher came to one of our summer teacher workshops and started his own program, now called Pull Your Share, scattered throughout Montana. Groups of high school students are taken out to pull at areas such as fishing access sites or trailheads. And they pull each year and decrease the knapweed. And you might recognize this picture on a billboard advertising that program. Very cool program that's going on throughout Montana. We also have worked with Dr. Littlefield on white top mite research, and we're releasing the mite into our insectary. Here's one of the galls from a first year release, well established, and here's what they look like. Again, like icky broccoli that you would not want to put in stir fry. So here's some difference in the height is what's going on. So here's some plants. That's last year's dead plants and this year's plants. And here's a dead plant from last year. Note the galling. Probably no seeds produced by that plant. We're really excited about this white top mite, and the students are really enjoying working with that creature. We also do lots of educational talks, field trips, workshops. We do weekly articles in some of the area newspapers and seminars. So here I and my students teaching some elementary age kids at our insectary site. Here we're working with some Audubon people, getting them insects. And here we're teaching a group of students whose parents were either killed in action or maimed in war. They were doing field trips to help these students deal with life. And we taught them about biocontrol. So we are seeing large areas of biocontrol success. Many area landowners have the insects for their weeds well established and are seeing great success. So our efforts are slowly turning more to monitoring and education rather than collection and redistribution, although we do a lot of both. And the other problem we have is that our collection sites keep crashing. That is, the insects work so well that it's no longer worth our time to go to those sites and collect, and we have to constantly seek new sites for collection. Everybody else is happy, it's only our problem. So here's a couple of landowners and some of the crew, and you see all this yellow Dalmatian toadflax here. This is a neat set of release sites that we have that we're hoping to be able to collect off of soon when the population builds up. In the hills behind us in the horizon, the population of toadflax is pretty well crashed and it's not collectible. The other cool thing about this site is there's a Native American buffalo jump right there that we get to look at. So a little aside, so technically you're not a weed if somebody wants you. And then one of our educational pictures ended up as a meme on the internet. I found this when I was looking. We wanted to show the difference in size of Siphochleonis, how they vary. They tend to get smaller when they get in high density, but someone added lesser of two weevils to that, and now that's all over the internet. But here is what those weevils do, and what we're constantly showing landowners. Pull up a plant, slice it open, the taproots deformed and galled. There's the big white larva or grub getting ready to pupate and emerge. And here's the plant that doesn't quite know it's dead yet, but is about to die. So, questions, anybody? We are really trying hard to make these plants just another pretty flower. I was attempting to jump this to go monitor. I didn't make it both ways, which is why my foot is wet. And here is the old last year's dead stems of some spotted knapweed and the new growth, which is much shorter because of the weevil, and the following year that plant died. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A box or save them for the end. Next up is Joseph Milan from the Bureau of Land Management.
Okay. So you've heard a lot of folks talk about monitoring today. What we attempted to do, and apologies for the wordy title, as soon as I put it on there on the slide, I was like, wow, that's a lot of words, is kind of figure out how to wrap our heads around success. The different measures of success that we usually operate with in the biocontrol world, there's a simple one that's a biological success. That's measuring one weed, as you've seen a lot of examples of, and that target weed if it's gone. We more prefer the ecological success. And that's looking at the long-term integrated weed management approach that kind of looks at the whole system with the goal of increasing biological diversity. But with that, you also get an economic success or an opportunity to demonstrate that. You just talked or heard from Todd about a social success. We've got a number of examples of those. And that's utilizing students to kind of talk about what biocontrol is, and they tend to educate their parents, who then tend to educate others. Scientific is a lot of the literature that you hear about, what you've heard today, and probably a lot more that would probably bore you to tears, which we're not going to talk about today. And then the last one, which is, I'm kind of setting the stage for some talks later, it's a political success. As you've heard a little bit about, increased long-term funding for biocontrol is sort of at a crossroads right now. And one way we can guarantee or help guarantee that we do get funding in the future is to document what's happening with biocontrol. And this is also my slide to make sure I put a picture of Carl in every presentation I have. So there you go, Carl. The cool thing about biocontrol is we do have some ancillary studies that have been done that kind of look for cost-benefit analyses across the spectrum of biocontrol. Admittedly, these that are best researched are not in the United States. We had big plans to do that, but we so far don't really have the chops or the personnel to knock that out. But you can kind of see the returns that we get with biocontrol. So the question then is, why don't we have those data for the United States? And I've got a lot of pictures up here. You've heard about rush skeleton weed from Carl earlier, Jeff Littlefield, you heard from him too. That's kind of a lot of the before and after pictures, they look great. And you're going to see some more of those here in a minute. But the before and after pictures don't generate those cost-benefit analyses that we're looking for. And I will say this is not without notice in the literature. There's been a real big push for the importance of quantitative post-release assessments in biocontrol. This has constantly been seen as sort of a weak point within biocontrol. And one of the presenters earlier said that we don't really, drop biocontrol off and then just walk away. Actually, usually we do. We have very few quantitative long-term assessments, and the impact of biocontrol on target weeds is often unknown. So to counter this, and I'm sure some folks have heard this talk before or a version of it, we put together a few years ago a standardized impact monitoring protocol, or SIMP for short, designed to be super easy to use and very simple to take into the field with you. Simple data requirements. We geared it towards junior high kids and up. The joke is I work for the BLM. We designed it so the Bureau of Land Management people could do it, and we're pretty successful in that. The problem has always been getting those data sheets back. So a couple years ago, we decided, just like somebody else said earlier today, everybody has a smartphone in front of them. So we put together an app, and the app is super easy to use. SIMP turned out to be a very great acronym for this whole process. And a lot of the information is taken on its own, gathered in the background, obviously the site information, or the location information rather, date, time, those sorts of things. And then there's a couple other slides or fields that you have to fill in. And then it gets to the nitty gritty, which is kind of the vegetation information. And I'm just going to kind of real briefly go over this and then dive into what you can actually do with these data. And then lastly, the most important part is the biocontrol information itself. So this has been widely adopted throughout the West, and other folks in other areas are adopting it as well. But we have, as you can see down here, I don't have the 2025 data summarized yet. I plan to do that, but we had a little bit of a shutdown. I'm not sure if anybody's aware of that. We started with about 80 sites in 2006, and last year we had about 437 sites totaled. To date, over 6,300 sites monitored. We've got those 8 systems we've really focused on, with ideals for pre-release monitoring with those other 4 systems and more that come online. This is meant to be something that we can kind of adopt widely. So there are tools within the website that are super easy to use, and all these data are available on iBiocontrol, which I saw Naisma did tease in that kind of brief. Everybody loves the before and after pictures. So these are geo-referenced before and after pictures that you can go in and look at. And you can see here the Dalmatian toadflax in about 2 years' time kind of went away. But what you also see is cheatgrass coming in behind that. So do we capture that information? We'll get to that in just a second. But what you can also see is with the decrease in Dalmatian toadflax populations, you also see a decrease in insects. And this is meant to be that classic predator-prey relationship that I'm surprised we haven't seen a slide of yet. That's why I left it out of my talk. So within the website, there's automatic query builders that look at desirable vegetation as well. Desirable cover is that green that you see on the slide there. And ideally, you see the target or the desirable vegetation kind of overtake the target weed, and you also keep those other weeds at bay at the same time. At this particular site, you kind of see a dip, and we're seeing sort of a rebound effect within the desirable vegetation and the target weed. You also typically see a decrease in the number of insects that correspond to a decrease in number of stems. And we use height of the tallest stem as sort of an indicator of site vigor. But we have some systems like Russian knapweed where that might not be the best indicator. So we're still kind of back to the drawing board with the best ways of going about teasing out those data. So that's a real brief primer on what SIMP is and what it can do. I wanted to highlight kind of what it can do beyond just that with the 3 different study systems, some of which you've heard about today, and one of which you have not. So one is Dalmatian toadflax. If you're not familiar with this one, it's clonal. You saw Todd talk about it before that, and I think somebody else mentioned it before that. Native to Central Europe, introduced into the USA in the late 1800s as an ornamental, invasive of rangeland and disturbed areas. And the problem is it's usually on those really steep shale hillsides that are treacherous with a backpack sprayer and almost impossible to treat any other way. Mucinus janthiniformis is probably the best known and the most effective biocontrol of the 7 biocontrol agents that have been introduced to control it. It's a stem-boring weevil. You can kind of see what's happening there in the lower right-hand corner there. The F1 generation estivates and overwinters in dead stems of the host. The larvae in the stem are in the stems in the spring. They emerge in April, and the adults are active all the way through August, and they do a really good job at decreasing Dalmatian toadflax populations over time. So what we did within the confines of the SIMP approach, and also kind of moving out to look at some other issues, was look at other factors that might be besides just those collected, because you can gather all these data behind the scenes via GIS and other methods. So over 15 years, we had over about 51 sites across Idaho. And we were able to kind of come up with, and I wasn't going to show you all of the data slides because we've got a short amount of time, and also it's after lunch. But what we did find is precipitation increases the number of stems for Dalmatian toadflax, but it does not appear to impact Mucinus janthiniformis. There were a couple other studies that looked at SIMP data for Dalmatian toadflax, and we wanted to add to that. And what we found was within that, the cover of Dalmatian toadflax and native forbs illustrate the utility of long-term ecological data sets such as SIMP for post-release assessments. And this is only the first step in modeling the effects of climate, which is obviously a confounding factor on the invasive plant and the biocontrol agent and their interactions. Another study system that we looked at that's primarily obviously an issue here in the West, as you can tell by the map down below here, is diffuse snapweed. It's a biennial or annual. It can also act as a short-lived perennial. Native to Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia, introduced to the US in the 1900s, and again, invasive within rangelands and disturbed areas. And you might see another familiar weevil down there in the lower right. Sevicleonis does a really good job on spotted knapweed, but it also does a great job on diffuse knapweed. And we've got another 12 different biocontrol agents that have been released for the knapweed complex. Sevicleonis acades was first introduced in 1988. And as you can see, it's kind of a really cool weevil. You saw some of those pictures down on the screen here. It does emerge in July and August, and we've utilized this, as Todd mentioned, in a bunch of different school applications. We had insectaries established after the Whitehall method in Idaho here. Adults are active for about 8 to 15 weeks, depending on where you're at, and you can collect them and move them around pretty quickly. What we wanted to do is look at some of the data that we did have and see what other factors might impact whether or not some of those biocontrol agents are effective. And what we found was within initial abiotic, looking at abiotic conditions, For unsuccessful and successful biocontrol, the successful sites did have higher mean temperatures and lower mean precipitation, and those occurred usually at lower elevations. Slope did not affect biocontrol success, but there are some more issues at play. For initial for vegetation factors that might affect biocontrol, there wasn't a lot of issues with target weed population cover for successful versus unsuccessful. And a lot of these are not statistically significant across the period of time where we're looking, but biocontrol agent abundance did appear to be a lot more prevalent at successful sites compared to unsuccessful sites. So in summary, for the diffuse knapweed example, biocontrol was more successful in sites with overall drier climates, likely due to the plant stress caused by dry conditions. Abundance of the knapweed root weevil was not a factor in the success of biocontrol, but overall we see large populations at successful sites. Biocontrol should be prioritized in sites with lower elevation, mean precipitation, and ground cover of diffuse knapweed, along with higher litter cover and mean temperature. So those are kind of general rules that we can apply to the field to have a little bit more success than we would have otherwise. Another study system that we kind of used for SIP and kind of built it out from there was leafy spurge, and this was a project in coordination with the Natalie West group. We've heard about leafy spurge already, so I won't touch on what that looks like. A bunch of different flea beetle populations for this, and 12 total biocontrol agents were introduced for the management of leafy spurge since the 1960s. The Aphthona species complex are considered the most successful. Larvae feed on the roots and below the grounds, as you saw in the previous talk by Todd. They emerge in the early summer, and the adults are active usually all the way through July. And you can collect those in massive numbers. So looking at how populations, how does leafy spurge demography relate to weed density and agent abundance, within SIMP, we kind of, and I'll show you in the next slide, we're able to tease out general limitations within current agents for biocontrol of leafy spurge. What we looked at was large leafy spurge sites, habitat conditions. That slide didn't turn out real well. Sorry about that. Habitat conditions led to weed prevalence plus agent plus abundance. Management recommendations for additional agent development were based on kind of an approach to an addition to SIMP, and that's looking at sampled plants along established SIMP's transects. And to kind of summarize what these data showed was, while post-release assessments are done with 3 to 6 study sites, looking at a more robust 40-plus study site provides valuable quantitative data on a broad scale. The real strength of SIMP in combination with data layers is in the capability of modeling much more analytical questions. So this little input of data capture that we have on the front end of doing these biocontrol releases, we can use to extrapolate to do a lot more. Additional layers can be added for analysis like soil, precipitation, elevation, and SIMP can be applied for new systems for baseline data, and that can just make those data sets much more powerful. The problem we have with monitoring right now is many of the systems that I showed you on that slide where we've got those 8 systems that we established for, we're trying to tell the story after the story's mostly been told. With some of these newer biocontrol agents, we get to do so ahead of time. So what does that look like? As a post-release analysis tool, SIMP does provide evidence of biocontrol impact, both long-term and varying by scales. You can kind of look at where you are locally or regionally, and you can look at evaluation. You can look at and evaluate other environmental factors like plant community composition, precipitation, elevation, and other things that might be affecting weed populations. And what other factors influence weed dynamics? Is impact locally variable? Are changes desirable? And that is the key. And by doing so, you can enhance integrated weed management and improve understanding of biocontrol, whether or not it is working, and adapt release strategies and control measures accordingly. And the key here is whether or not it's working, because you don't know if it's not working if you don't go look. And if it's not working, that gives you an opportunity to pivot and try a different weed management approach. And sorry, I spoke so fast, but 15 minutes, it goes by quick. I will stop sharing and wait for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. Carrie Montier is up next from the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Services.
Hi, everybody. So I get to talk to you today about some successes that we had with biological control in Florida with respect to cattle ranchers and the tropical soda apple invasion. So when you think about Florida agriculture, cattle's probably not the first thing that comes to your mind. Most of you will think about citrus, of course, but the cattle industry in Florida is a very powerful sector of the agriculture industry. We've got a little over 1.5 million head of cattle, so that includes calves. So those of you all out west are probably laughing at that number. We just don't have the same amount of land to be able to put cattle, but this is actually, so the market share for direct economic contributions of the Florida cattle industry, about $1.1 billion a year. And that equates to about a little over 6% of Florida's agricultural revenues each year. So it is a pretty hefty slice of our agriculture here in Florida. Florida cattle industry has had its fair share of problems, and one of the big ones was tropical soda apple. So tropical soda apple is an invasive plant that's native to South America. It was first reported in Florida in 1988. So it was thought to be introduced along with cattle from Brazil. Once it was found in Florida, it then spread into most of the other southeastern states. And in addition to being a problem in cattle ranches, it also can be a reservoir of plant pathogens for solanaceous crops, since it is in the Solanaceae. So just a bad player all around. But we're going to talk about the cattle industry today and its impact on that industry. So this is a really great cartoon that I found when trying to find images for this talk. This was a huge issue for cattle ranchers, as you can tell in this delightful cow that really is not liking TSA. But one of the major reasons why it was such an issue for the cattle industry is that these plants are just not palatable to cattle. And one of those reasons is because this plant is very, very armed. And so we've got thorns and spines on the petioles, on the top of the leaves, on the bottom of the leaves, and on the stems. And so I'm not a cattle rancher, but I think the cows probably don't like to feed on food that bites back, and this one definitely bites back. However, the cattle really, really like these fruits. And so cattle preferentially feed on the fruits of this plant. The seeds make it through the gut. They get planted in a very nice steaming pile of fertilizer on the other end, and then it perpetuates the infestation. So by 1995, 1.2 million acres of pasture land was infested in Florida. So in 1995, this is about 20% of the pasture land in Florida. So it was a big problem. And this equated to about $6.5 to $16 million in control costs annually. So this is pre-biocontrol. Most of the control here was chemical and mechanical. And this led to economic losses of about $11 million a year. So this was a big issue. They're spending a lot of money on control, as well as associated economic losses for the industry. So biological control, as you all probably know after hearing all of these delightful talks today, takes some time when we're talking about classical biological control. So a biological control program was started. So the development was started pretty quickly, but we didn't have our first beetle released until 2003. So this is the tropical soda apple leaf beetle, Boliviana boliviana. We've got our adults on the top left, and then our immatures or larvae in the bottom right. These are extremely voracious feeders. They really like tropical soda apples. So you see all of the leaf tissue is eaten here. So we released these beetles first time in 2003. And by 2010, they had reduced the density of tropical soda apple by up to 90% in regions and reduced fruit production by up to 94%. So some really good impact here. There is issues getting these things established in areas with colder winters, but they did a fantastic job in most of Florida, particularly in peninsular Florida. But this isn't my story. This story belongs to the cattle ranchers. And so if it wasn't for the Florida Cattlemen's Association meeting that's currently going on this week, we would have a cattle rancher talking to you. So I did the next best thing, and I got Keith Crum, who's a cattle rancher to record his story for us. So I'm going to go ahead and try to play that.
Born in 81 and ranched my whole life, multi-generational rancher right here in Gates County, Florida. And so this tropical soda apple, when I was in high school, early high school, we were hog hunting one night on the Likes Brothers Ranch where my father worked. And hogs got over to where the bull pasture was. When we crossed the fence, no lights, and started across the pasture, we ran into a tropical soda apple forest. We had no idea because it kind of had just came into that bull pasture and hadn't spread out away from there. The bulls made perfect condition for the seed to be viable and to thrive because, you know, they kept the ground tore up around the feeders where the hogs were at. So anyway, it was instant stop you could imagine in the dark. That was my first experience with a tropical soda apple. Well, that got me to wondering, you know, at a very young age, what is this? And why all of a sudden do we see this? And within that next year, my grandfather passed away, and the ranch that he was running, my dad took over. But before he passed away, before my grandfather, Tommy Crump, passed away, I would go and help him in his theory or method to removing this plant that had showed up 40 miles south of Likes' ranch down into southern Glades County, where this other ranch was at on the Caloosahatchee River, was to go out with labor and hand pull it with gloves, dig it up at the root, load it on an old hay trailer, and then haul it to a burn pile, let it lay there and die, and then burn it. And I was part of this labor. I was young. Some people wanted it done, so we did it. Well, I also witnessed that burn pile germinated to grow the biggest forest of tropical soda apples you'd ever seen right there after it was burned. So you can backdate these years. There wasn't much data or, you know, hearsay on what everybody was doing. So my grandfather went to the guaranteed kill-off, diesel and remedy. And so four-wheelers were starting to get set up. That was your mode of transportation, was a four-wheeler. Chemical containers put together sprayers for us that was used in the citrus industry. And that was the first time I'd ever witnessed, you know, hand spraying off four-wheelers in cow pasture, mass spraying. And so it was with diesel and remedy. High rate of remedy, pure diesel. Now, diesel was only, probably 50, 60 cents a gallon back then. So it wasn't that big a deal to spray it like that. You just ended up with a ton of dead spots everywhere in your pasture, and you were spraying diesel everywhere in your pasture. And then you had some bilateral damage into some oaks. And so I was 15 years old, 14, 15 years old when all this occurred. And then when he passed away, we inherited the ranch job plus that problem of the soda apple. And my dad had worked for Likes for the previous 17 years in the citrus part of Likes. And so he had herbicide background and wanted to be able to conquer this problem because this problem had come in his lifetime where it had never been seen. And so I don't know how the university reached out to my dad or if he reached out to them, but my dad took me down to Immokalee to, a field day with Dr. Jeff Malahy. This was my first encounter with UF, which I'll background you now. I'm married to a livestock extension agent for UF. She's over at Glades, Lee, Charlotte, Henry, and Collier County. And if I'd have known then what UF could do for me, I would have stayed committed to them, and younger. But that was my first taste of it. And one of the things that stuck out was that they took a seed pod, and stuck it in a jar on the shelf and left it there for a year, pulled it out, planted it, and it germinated instantly. And so the way my brain works is this stuff travels with water. You know, when I'd be back on the ranch, once we would go through and do a hand spray treatment, you would see it start coming back up at the edge of the ponds where you couldn't get to with a mower, or you couldn't have got there with a four-wheeler, and so it would reestablish itself. Everybody knows the herbicides that come out and their timelines, and we quit using diesel and started using some surfactants that really worked on that leaf. And so as we got to knocking the population of the soda apple back, biocontrol hit us in, I want to say about 99. It'd been my senior year of high school. And on the ranch, I noticed that there was a lot of damage to the soda apple. So I found the bug, showed it to my dad, and at the time, Tommy Hare was our extension agent in Fort Haven. And so we got that bug up there to Tommy, and it was I want to say it was a false Colorado potato beetle. It's a little red, ugly bug, but it was all over these soda apples. It was going to town, and it got to us prior to the TSA beetle. But once the TSA beetle got here, there's cowboys, young cowboys right now that I work with that have no idea what kind of problem that soda apple was, to us on these ranches. You couldn't get your horse to go in there. You couldn't get your cows to go in there. And if cows had a trail in there, you couldn't get in there to get them out. It was horrible, horrible plan. So you could research and look back that they was talking about quarantine our cattle here in Florida. That was going to be detrimental to us. Beef prices weren't that great through that part of the 90s, but we'd have had to put cattle up and held them, and it would have ate up all of our profits. So very thankful to the University of Florida and everybody that had a hand in getting this problem controlled. And so that is my story about the TSA plant and the beetle. In current times, I operate a herbicide service, and we don't spray much soda apple. If it is present, I'll make sure that I have Grazon-X in my tank, but rarely do I get a call to treat some soda apples. Majority of the time, if I get to a ranch and I see soda apple, these people don't even know what kind of problem it was, or that it could be if it was to mutate or through something of that nature. And 90% of the time, I'll spray 4 soda apples, go find a colony of TSA beetles, and then relocate them to this ranch so they'll reestablish, and it's not a problem again.
So that's the story from a cattle rancher who literally lived through it. So just to wrap up, the problem was bad, right? We 20% of pasture land in Florida was infested with this plant, spending millions of dollars controlling it annually. We've got this adventive biocontrol comes in the late 90s, so that's provided some suppression. And then classical biological control arrives in 2003. So it reduced tropical soda apple in cattle ranches in Florida, and it's still around, of course, but it's not an issue anymore. They're just spot treating it. So this is a great success story in Florida. The cattle ranchers are a big fan of biocontrol now, and we appreciate that support. But like I said, this wasn't my story. So thanks to Heath for recording that video for me. These are some of the people that were involved with that biological control program, some of which are in the audience today. You want to talk biocontrol? There's my contact information. If you want to know more about what we're doing in Florida currently, there's the QR code that will take you to my lab website. So thanks so much for having me today.
Thanks, Carrie. Next up, we're getting to the last section today. We have Lindsay Woodward from Wyoming Department of Agriculture, Weed and Pest Council.
Thanks for the invitation to talk to you guys about the stressful to live through but boring to talk about part of weed control. So at the risk of inducing a little bit of PTSD, here's a little bit of background. But you guys might remember in January of this year, federal agencies had to figure out and review all federal financial assistance and then come up with a report on all their obligations and disbursements. And I can only imagine the absolute nightmare that was for all you guys. So my deepest sympathies for you guys having to sort that out. And the result of that, of course, was that all kinds of funding programs, all kinds of various agencies stopped while everybody processed what that meant, what their responsibilities were to figure this out. And so for Wyoming, as this happened, the information that I started hearing back from our weed and pest districts, and we have 23, was that it was all kinds of different things that happened fast, and all of their programs spanned so much work that they got a bunch of different things. So one was a stop order, and this one was one of the most stressful because it was a one-day turnaround. You had to respond to this stop work termination order within a day, and if you didn't, the letter had said something like this funding won't be continued. Other things that we ran into were funding freeze with no notice, but as soon as people tried to access their funds, they were locked. In some cases, you could get paid for work that had been completed. Several districts had funding programs that had terminated at the end of 24, and they were waiting for new agreements to get processed in 25, and all of that stopped. And there were a couple of extremely lucky districts that didn't have any disruptions. So after we got that information, I asked districts to give us some data, kind of the big picture. What is the total amount of funding that you've got frozen up right now? And if you lose that, how much other funding do you have leveraged that will go away? And so I got this spreadsheet back from my districts, and this is just a representation. I just cut it down so that it would fit nice, so you could peruse this real quick during this presentation. But the big numbers at the end ended up with just under 17 million that were frozen, and that would have cost a little over 6 million in leveraged funds elsewhere. So after I got all those responses from the districts, the council wrote a letter to all of our congressional delegation, and it kind of outlined what we had, what is our mission, what are we trying to do with invasive species, and what does that mean for Wyoming? Where does that funding go? Wyoming's 50% federal land, so that it was a really, really big impact for us. And then we talked about some of the projects that are disrupted, that it was interrupting our planning, as well as projects that had already been completed. And then I kind of pulled the big numbers so that that was front and center. So this is the letter we sent to our congressional delegation. And Wyoming's pretty small. We only have 3, but they are all warriors for us. I have a lot of respect for how closely our delegation works with Wyoming. And we are also really lucky that all 3 of our delegation are on some kind of natural resource committee. So all of them were interested in this problem. But once we started kind of boiling it down and started hearing back, and which was the next day, I had responses from all of them the next day. It was Representative Hageman that especially activated her team to work on this for us. She's definitely a champion for natural resource and ag issues, especially for Wyoming, but she does that for Western states as well. She's also really dedicated to being a liaison with federal agencies. So she dug right in. Her team went right to work for us. And once we started having kind of a back and forth with our delegation's staffing teams, the way we started processing it was to look at the information that they asked for was kind of a top down. It's all federal funding. And then is it a funding initiative? And then looking at what department and the agencies, the funding streams. And then we got all the way down to the agreement name. So specifically what funds are frozen for districts. And then when they started working to get funds reinstated, it was almost the opposite. So they started with that agreement, which spread to more agreements in that funding stream, which led to more funding streams within that agency, and it just went kind of back up the other direction. And then slowly we started seeing those things thaw. And I say slowly because it felt slowly, but by March, this blew up in February. By March, we had a lot of programs starting to come back online. And it looked like, especially the ones that were older, thawed first. And part of that, excuse me, was, I'll kind of touch on this in a second, but it was because it was previous administration. Some of those agreements had been set up long enough ago that it got through that. And then as we went through the others, older agreements were faster. And then it started with individual districts and then big batches. So every district that had a program in the same place got thawed and then ballooned from there. The thing that by far took us the longest was getting new agreements written. And then the big takeaways, once everything was getting closer to normal, wording in those agreements meant everything. That if you had any kind of wording in that agreement, whether it was terms, whether it was the narrative, whether it was a funding description, a budget, if it had any key words that got snagged in AI, it got rejected regardless of context. So for example, if in that agreement you had written something about an extent of natural plant diversity, and you had the word diversity in there, that was a potential reason for that to get snagged. And so a lesson after that, several of our partners suggested that in order to get things freed up quickly, the new wording should have other keywords in it, like rangeland productivity or mineral extraction. And so my takeaway is to not specify, is to keep it more mission centered and not initiative centered. And another big takeaway then was to find all your data, especially the money. If you can talk dollars, especially dollars lost. And in Wyoming, if you talk about the federal government contributing money, that will free up money from other sources. It really goes a long way. And then to zero in and then zoom back out, to not look at big chunks, which was something that was a little bit opposite of the way I would have thought about it. I would have expected that if you attack a funding stream and you get that all freed up, that it would affect all the other programs, and it was the other way. It worked up and not down. And then a few disclaimers, because this is Wyoming, and Wyoming is really small and well connected. For example, it turned out that one of our weed and pest employees is related to Harriet Hageman, and I think that would be the case if you looked a little bit with our other reps as well. So it's a little bit different, I'm sure, than in a lot of other states. Another, weed and pest districts in Wyoming are very well funded. So even when some of these federal funds got frozen, in order to not lose ground, Wyoming districts could pick up some of that lapse for a little while. And then, of course, our federal partners are absolutely amazing. And this sounds like it was something that Wyoming did, and we worked hard on it, but it wouldn't have happened without our immediate contacts in Wyoming giving us information and explaining what their needs were as well. So that's a super quick and dirty of how that went for us. It was sure stressful, but I'm glad we got through it.
Thank you, Lindsay. Next up, we have Jennifer Andrews from Washington State University Extension.
Thanks, Megan. My name is Jennifer Andrews. I am a professor with Washington State University and the State Weed Biocontrol Specialist. So Melissa and I are going to wrap up the summit by talking about the state of biocontrol as it currently is in the US and ways that we're hoping we can help it sustain into the future. So similar to Lindsay, we also conducted a survey. The Biocontrol Committee developed and sent this out to weed biocontrol practitioners and various other partners in October and November to kind of get a sense of how things had changed after January 2025. So we had 32 completed surveys, and most of those came from non-federal agency and organization, and though we did have just over a quarter who were feds. You can see in the map the variability in terms of the number of how biocontrol was conducted in different states. So we asked people what states does your biocontrol work occur in or benefit? And so you can see from Hawaii, it was 1 in the lighter shade, all the way up to 12 respondents from Idaho, Nevada, and California. We also asked about federal funding lost after January 2025. And one of the big takeaways that we saw was that for people who were doing almost exclusively biocontrol work, 76 to 100%, we did see more federal funding losses. Some of our respondents, 3 of them indicated they had lost 100% funding, and that really inhibited their ability to do their work. We also had 3 who said that they did not see any funding losses. And I think one of the caveats around that is that even though they did not see funding losses this year, there was a lot of comments about funding delays and future uncertainties. In addition to this, even if the funding hadn't gone away, there were comments that indicated that it wasn't available. So one quote is, "The money is still there, but I've lost staff due to the DRP and hiring freezes. And since we have severe spending limitations, it might as well not be there." We were also curious how confident people felt about receiving future funding. And most of our respondents felt were ranging somewhere in the somewhat confident to not confident at all. And this seemed to have something to do also with agency. So there was a little more confidence in APHIS funding in the future, but many other federal agencies, there was either no to low confidence, with some respondents saying that funding was either permanently terminated or the whole program had collapsed. This respondent said, "My federal partners do not seem to have a clear sense of whether funding will be available in the future. Federal priorities have changed for each agency, and although we are trying to fit into those priorities, it isn't clear whether invasive species or biocontrol will be prioritized." As we all probably well know, there are a lot of federal positions that are now vacated since January 2025. And we were curious, if they aren't filled, how big an impact would that be on future biocontrol efforts? And again, we saw a range primarily between moderate impact up to severe. And there are several ways that these impacts are going to be felt. And so these impacts are happening at all levels. The first thing is we've lost huge amounts of institutional knowledge. We expect to see reduced research. For any positions that have been maintained, those people are tending to be overloaded with too many roles, and they're often lacking expertise in invasive species control. We also have a reduced mechanism to pass funds between agencies and outside partners, and this is really limiting the efficiency of our work. And there's also fewer technicians, and this is reducing the ability to conduct research, and it's also reducing our ability to make biocontrol operational. Another respondent said there's a structure that is necessary for classical biocontrol to function, and that structure is going to be at least partially ripped down if federal funding continues to shrink. Once it's torn apart, it will take a long time to rebuild. So the biocontrol community is trying to meet these challenges and come up with solutions to figure out ways to make sure that biocontrol can be sustainable into the future. And we met in the spring as a lot of these changes were rolling out. We did 2 different workshops, a virtual workshop and one in person at the National Forum on Biocontrol. And we split this workshop between 2 different segments. So the first segment was asking who should care about biocontrol? Why should they care about biocontrol? And what are some of the potential impacts if we can get more people to advocate and be interested in using biocontrol? What we found was that we broke this into 10 broad community groups. Many of those people were mentioned today in various talks. We found 23 different reasons why people should care and 22 potential impacts if they start to care. The second part of the workshop was wondering how can we leverage our current resources to meet these challenges? And we developed 34 action items. Now, all of this workshop activity happened in the spring just before field season. So we are delayed a little bit and we are going to start picking up some of these action items now and start trying to move them forward. So a couple of different avenues we need to explore. Within the biocontrol community, we have internal actions that I won't go into today. We also have funding mechanisms, and Melissa's really going to hit on that for the final presentation of the day. But the one I wanted to really talk about today is our outreach in order to increase biocontrol awareness, knowledge of the practice, and usage of usage. So the Biocontrol Committee has been pretty committed to increasing education and communication to a broader audience for quite a few years. We've developed the Biocontrol 101 curriculum. We have weed and biocontrol fact sheets. These are available for all North American biocontrol systems, and here's a QR link to go to them. And I think as biocontrol agents come on board, we will have more fact sheets. We're also working on infographics that will provide people with an understanding, a basic understanding of what is classical biocontrol, how can it be used, is it safe? So stay tuned for those as we get them developed. And we're also trying to build up the biocontrol, ibiocontrol.org site. This is going to be the clearinghouse for all things weed biocontrol in the future, and it already has a lot of great content. So please check in regularly with that website as it's getting a bit of a facelift soon, and we'll just be adding more and more content there. We also want to do a better job of engaging the community in order to improve people's awareness of what we're doing. And you heard today about a lot of amazing stories across the country where people are engaging with biocontrol, and we just need to see more of that. Rodrigo gave a great presentation about social media presence. Most biocontrol people tend to not have a strong social media presence, but I think we could really benefit from doing that. We should be utilizing community science platforms, for example, iNaturalist, to be getting our message out there. Anytime we can get positive media exposure, that's a benefit. We recently had a positive article in the New York Times, just generally on biocontrol. And that was, I think, our first New York Times positive article. So that was great. And then finally, field demonstration days are really powerful, especially if you can get key legislators there. You really can get people in support and interested in biocontrol when you show it in action. We also need to be building stronger relationships with a really wide variety of groups. And I think this is an invasive species issue in general, but biocontrol fits right into that. So there are a lot of different groups who interact in the environment and need more, who might really benefit from understanding more about invasive species and also biocontrol options. So if you see yourself in these categories, whether it's, you're in education or you're in industry, we are really looking to join up and figure out how we can work better together to meet our management goals of reducing weeds and also get more information out there. And then finally, we want to look at increasing our cross-disciplinary projects. So whether we can do that through community science, projects. If you look at this map again, you can see that we share a lot of weeds and there's a lot of people working on things. So is there a way for us to do projects on a more regional opportunities? And then we also need to create opportunities for young people because we need to develop future leaders. And so finding ways to get them involved and wanting to be in this field would be excellent. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and you've heard lots of great stories today. If you think there's a way for you to jump in to those stories or to create your own, please feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to pass you on to somebody else or talk to you about it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. For our final talk of the day, Melissa is going to expand more on what Jen just talked about.
All right, so thank you so much for sticking with us to the end of the summit. Most of the presentations so far have focused on some major successes from Wyoming's unique and sustaining funding for biocontrol, to target weed management successes, to innovative examples of engaging the youth and public in biocontrol activities. It's important to keep all of these successes front of mind while I go in the opposite direction and talk about some of the biggest challenges weed biocontrol is facing today, which are limited capacity and reduced funding, and how these challenges are impacting both implementation and development projects. Jen Andrews just did a great job of providing an overview of the survey that we conducted that was looking into the impacts of federal policy changes and how they're impacting weed biocontrol. She also shared some of the specific findings. I'm going to share a few more insights throughout my presentation, starting with these respondent quotes that I think did a great job of summarizing the current state of the issue, with one saying, "Although we currently work with available agents, the future depends on the agent pipeline to provide safe, effective biocontrols. The biocontrol pipeline, including the agents themselves and the expertise to work with them, is largely federally funded or dependent on federal positions. Loss of federal employees and expertise harms the current and even more so the future practice of biocontrol." One of the survey questions asked, "How will the effectiveness of your biocontrol program be impacted if your federal funding is reduced by 50% or more?" As you can see, majority of the respondents indicated that they would face a severe or high reduction in effectiveness. 2 respondents specifically stated that we would be unable to move forward with a state biocontrol program. Acquiring agents and making them available to partners would be severely limited. And our ability to provide insects to cooperators would be significantly reduced. I can personally speak to an example along the lines of these quotes. The Montana Biocontrol Project assists with out-of-state biocontrol agent distribution, which is made possible by funding provided by USDA APHIS. We collect biocontrol agents that are abundant in Montana and distribute them to states that are in need. In 2025, we distributed 6 agents to help manage 4 target weeds to 14 other states. This distribution effort would not be possible without the funding that APHIS provides. Another survey question asked how hiring freezes, workforce reductions, or reorganizing within the federal government has impacted biocontrol projects or operations. And I wanted to specifically discuss the canceled or scaled back biocontrol development projects, with one respondent saying, "The restrictions on sending federal money to foreign collaborators has definitely hampered progress of development projects. Biological control does not work without international collaboration." This is a list of the development projects that are currently being delayed or stalled due to changes in federal policies. I'm sure this is not a complete list, and there are very likely other target weeds that need to be added. But I would now like to dive a bit deeper and provide more detail on a few of these projects. The first example is the annual invasive grasses, specifically cheatgrass, medusa head, red brome, and wiregrass, which at this time are being lumped together for this initial exploration work. These grasses have dramatically increased fire frequency, which prevents many native species from reestablishing. They also have a significant impact on wildlife and the economics for ranching operations. Untreated annual grasses are capable of expanding quickly, and treatments are not always effective. This leaves many land managers unsatisfied with the level of control they gain from herbicide applications or manual removal. This is why there is interest in developing biocontrol for these high priority invasives. One of the many reasons biocontrol is needed to help with the management of annual grasses is the widespread distribution of these grasses, which seems to continually expand. The green is where cheatgrass has been identified. This is for Medusa head, red brome, and wiregrass. This is a very early stage development project with majority of the focus on native range surveys, though there has been some testing of potential agents. Through surveys, they have identified 6 species attacking cheatgrass. These will also be tested on red brome, since red brome and cheatgrass are closely related. They've also identified 2 species attacking Medusa head. More surveys are needed to identify species attacking wiregrass. However, this project is facing a significant reduction in the federal funding it receives, with one federal funder going from $40,000 annually to 0. Additionally, they are facing delays due to the inability to send funding over to overseas collaborators to assist with surveys that often need to be done on weeks or days' notice because of the grass's phenology and the weather. This type of work is very difficult to plan far enough in advance for travel from the US. At this time, this project is likely stalled. The next example is Kogon grass, which is one of the 10 worst weeds in the US. It's distributed mostly in the southeastern portion of the country. It spreads by seeds and rhizomes and currently infests over 100,000 hectares. It's capable of invading forests and grasslands and is unsuitable for livestock grazing. And again, tools like herbicide alone are not providing a satisfactory level of control, and therefore there's interest in developing biocontrol agents to assist with the control and spread of this invasive grass. Approximately 65 insect species have been found attacking Kogon grass in the native range surveys in Australia, Africa, Japan, and South Korea. They are currently focusing testing on the 3 most promising species, with 4 others prioritized for future testing, and surveys are continuing. But unfortunately, this project is facing a 75% or more reduction in the federal funding that it receives, which will seriously impact the progress of this project in the near future. I realize this presentation has mostly been a downer, but there are ways that you can help change this, and maybe that will be the next success story we talk about. The first way is reinvigorating biocontrol consortiums. Many development projects used to be, and some still are, funded through consortiums, which are basically just a group of stakeholders that have a common interest in developing a suite of biocontrol agents for a target weed. They all contribute what they can, and the funding is pooled to make the development work happen. The example that you see on this slide is a summary of the Flowering Rush Biocontrol Consortium funding from 2013 to present. There are a variety of partners, federal, tribal, state, and provincial, and county, that all contributed different amounts of funding ranging from $7,000 to $65,000. Some of these contributions were made annually, and others were made just once. If there is a target weed that you urgently need additional tools to manage, please consider contributing to that weed's biocontrol consortium. Feel free to reach out to me if this interests you and you are unsure of how to get funding to the appropriate person. I will help you figure out if there's currently biocontrol work occurring on that weed and who the consortium chair is or how to get funding to the researcher working on that target weed. Additionally, if you're able to, please let your representatives know how important this work is. International collaboration is necessary to develop biocontrol agents. We are not sending money overseas for work that could be done here. Much of this work has to be done overseas. And lastly, one of our overseas collaborators that you heard about today, Cabby Switzerland, is facing a significant reduction in funding due to the decision to pause or terminate international agreements. However, the funder has requested a list of US stakeholders that benefit from the work that CABI does. And this will potentially help to support reinstating that funding. If you would benefit from having biocontrol for any of the weeds listed here, please scan this QR code and fill out this very short survey to add your organization to the list of stakeholders that would benefit from CABI's work, or that do benefit from CABI's work. It's important that we convey the wide reach and broad stakeholder benefits of CABI's work. I will put the link to the survey in the chat in case the QR code doesn't work for you, but also feel free to reach out to me for the link or for anything else. Thank you.
I'm Monica Chandler with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Noxious and Invasive Weed Program. So we heard many wonderful presentations. Please put your questions in the Q&A. There is a question about, is biocontrol being deprioritized for funding relative to other management tools, or is funding being cut equally across the board for invasive plant research and management tools? So multiple people could answer this question.
Hey, Monica, this is Joey. I'll jump in and take a first crack at it. Kind of the long and the short of this is biocontrol has been funded on such a shoestring budget for so long that even a small dip in funding has profound ripple effects. I can speak from the BLM side of the house. The funding that we've used in the past has been special project dollars that were completely frozen up. What I can't do is speak for what that looks like across invasive plant research and management for the other entities within the BLM. I will say that fire and fuels reduction has mostly not been touched, but within the extremely small budget we have within the Bureau of Land Management, I've seen about a 65% reduction in project dollars. And this is not coming from a large pot of funds. So it is a big, huge loss.
Thank you. All right, does anyone else want to jump in on that topic? Any other presenter?
I'll jump in real quick from a Forest Service standpoint. It's hard to say what our research counterparts have been cut in the U.S. Forest Service research. And part of it is funding. A lot of it is just personnel that have left. So that is going to be a big hit going forward. We still have a few people around, so that's good, but it's nothing compared to what we had 5 years ago. And I think that loss of brain trust is really what's going to be the hang up in the next couple of years. The second item I'll bring up is the IIJA with the Infrastructure Jobs Act that was passed a couple of years ago. That funding still seems to be coming out, so there's a little bit of funding still available. Not for overseas work though. A lot of that money is going to the states. It's not big in the big scheme of things, but at least it's still out there. Unfortunately, I think this is the last year of funding. Then after that, it's going to get really thin. So I'm not, unless Congress surprises me, but right now that's kind of the tea leaves for the moment.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question to Joey's presentation on SIMP. There was a question that was answered in the Q&A about where do you find the SIMP protocol, but could you tell us a little bit more, please, about is this like Survey 123? Who should be using this tool, and which target weeds are prioritized for monitoring?
Yeah, sure. 15 minutes goes by pretty quick. So thank you for the additional platform. Yeah, it is based on Survey 123. The SIMP app is available to anybody. We have a way to kind of pay for that. That's, I guess, still being done. Past next year, we're not quite sure, but right now, it is basically for every single forb that we have, and we can also adapt it for annual grasses. What it does not do well currently, we're working on different ways to kind of make it more compatible for climbing vines rather, aquatics. I mean, Jen and Melissa can attest to this, and Natalie if she's on too. and just some other species or growth habits like that. We don't really have it adapted for something like that as of yet. But for the most part, forbs and grasses, we pretty much, it's a kind of a, you can adapt it, or we do it on the fly regularly to make sure that it's applicable. And these are not data that go into a black hole. The site that I put in chat is accessible to everybody. You can see my data, you can see, Jen's data, you can see Melissa's data. Anybody who puts data in there, you can see within 24 hours. So if you need those data for presentations, or you're just curious about what's going on in your own backyard, it's all there.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions? I don't see any more coming in.
Monica, did you want me to cover the accessing current approved biocontrol agent follow-up question?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
This is a bit of a tricky one because it sort of depends on what state you're in. And I don't believe that Missouri has a biocontrol specialist, a dedicated specialist, and I could be wrong on that. I just haven't met them. So if there is no specialist on biocontrol, you can reach out to, say, me or Melissa, and we can, depending on your weed species, we can try to help. But again, as Melissa said, with limitations in funding, it makes it harder to supply as many biocontrols as people want. So you're welcome to reach out to us and we can see what we can do. But I also put that with the caveat around it of we are also limited. So I would definitely encourage, if you are in a state that doesn't have a biocontrol program, that be something that you start trying to figure out if it's possible, so that you can have more engagement in terms of current and future biocontrols. Thanks, Monica.
Oh, thank you. Are there any other questions, or should we go to the wrap up?
Sure, I can wrap it up. Thank you all to our speakers for making time to talk to us today and tell us about your work. Thank you to the USDA Forest Service for sponsoring this summit, and the Biocontrol Committee members and NIASMA staff for putting this together. The summit has been recorded and will be available on the NIASMA YouTube channel for later viewing. And also, please, before you head out, please take time to fill out this post-summit survey. It's posted in the chat box. If you aren't a member already, please join NIASMA. You are also welcome to join the Biocontrol Committee. So if you have interest in that or want more information, please reach out to us, Jennifer, Andreas, and Melissa Maggio. Their contact information is also posted or going to be posted in the chat box. So thank you all again for joining today, and I hope you have a great day.